Chapter 262. That night, because Poplar Fruit had come back, Fong Beibei went back to the dormitory to sleep. Poplar Fruit took out his laptop to prepare for the meeting that Yaro Dehua had mentioned. He didn't get into bed until 2 o'clock in the morning. In fact, Poplar Fruit was already very tired. The breakthrough in his artistic conception not only consumed a lot of his physical strength, but also affected his mental state. If Fong Beibei hadn't asked him to accompany her to the stray dog rescue station tomorrow, which was Saturday, Poplar Fruit would have already climbed into bed and fallen asleep. So in order not to delay things, Poplar Fruit exhausted himself. In the middle of the night, he closed his eyes and groped his way into the bedroom, then threw himself directly on the bed. Poplar Fruit's huge body fell on the bed with a bang. Then, something fluffy bounced up and flew onto Poplar Fruit's face. Woof! Goldie was also sleeping. Suddenly, it jumped up, and it was so scared that it kicked its limbs on Poplar Fruit's face. Fuck! Yangwa squinted her eyes and pushed Goldie, who was almost frightened out of its wits, off the bed. This idiot, I've only been away for half a month, and Fong Beibei has raised it. It even dares to climb onto the bed to sleep. Although Fong Beibei had bathed it and Kiki before she left, this kind of action was not allowed. In Poplar Fruit's hometown, domestic dogs were not allowed to enter the house. Ah Fu sometimes sneaked in. If it came in, the owner would definitely chase it out with a broom. Goldie was thrown on the ground. It struggled for a while, but its head was still a little confused. It felt the surrounding environment and felt that something was wrong. It jumped onto the bed again. Before it could proudly step on the soft quilt to find a place to sleep, a big hand suddenly waved over, and Goldie rolled back onto the bed. Woof woof. Goldie barked twice, as if it was protesting against Poplar Fruit's barbarity. Then, it jumped onto the bed again. Pushed down, barked twice, and came up again. Goldie seemed to have the tenacity to not let go of the mountain, and it insisted on jumping onto the bed. Poplar Fruit was finally impatient, and Goldie's barking was not a good thing. If it kept barking, Kiki would wake up. Okay. Poplar Fruit turned over and lay in the middle of the bed, muttering, "Go to sleep if you want to, I'll teach you a lesson tomorrow." Although Poplar Fruit occupied most of the bed, Goldie's permission, it was still satisfied. It stepped on the bed twice, then curled up and laid down on the hole it had made. The next day, Poplar Fruit woke up early with full health. He looked back at Goldie, who was lying on its back, and wondered if it was dreaming, because its 4 little feet were randomly moving around. "You don't even know if you're naked." Poplar Fruit pointed at the little guy, and a smile bloomed on his face. "Forget it, I won't argue with it. Isn't it just climbing onto the bed and sleeping together?" Poplar Fruit practiced 2 sets of boxing at home, but because the space was a little narrow, Poplar Fruit couldn't fully use it. But it didn't matter, because Poplar Fruit didn't plan to practice this morning. He practiced 2 sets of boxing just to consolidate the will state from yesterday. "Let's go to Citibank first," Fong Beibei said to Poplar Fruit as she got in the car and fastened her seat belt. "Beibei." Kiki's cheerful voice came from behind. She was fixed in the baby safety seat in the back seat by Poplar Fruit. When she saw Fong Beibei, she waved her hands and greeted her. "Hi." Fong Beibei turned her head and smiled at Kiki. "Kiki, good morning. Be a good girl and sit in the back. It's not safe in the front." "Oh, Goldie is here too." Fong Beibei looked down and saw Goldie jumping around in the back seat. She smiled and waved her hand. "Why are we going to Citibank?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. "To withdraw money." Fong Beibei shook the bank card Poplar Fruit gave her yesterday and said, "Withdraw 200,000 yuan and donate it to the relief center." "Am I Jin?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. "No." Fong Beibei shook her head and said, "RMB. Isn't 200,000 yuan too little?" Poplar Fruit started the car and asked, "How about I add 800,000 yuan, and we'll have 1 million yuan to donate?" "What are you doing?" Fong Beibei glanced at him and said, "Do you think I'm reluctant to donate?" Without waiting for Poplar Fruit to speak, Fong Beibei explained, "That's because Grandma Liu said that the relief center can't accept large donations." "Is it because you're afraid that someone will create hype?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. No, we're not afraid of hype, as long as it's good for the dogs. Fong Beibei shook her head and said, that's because the relief center doesn't need so much money, and it doesn't need to expand the scale of the relief center. It turned out that the couple, Zhong Guangde and Grandma Liu, who founded the relief center, knew better than anyone else that the relief center was actually a double-edged sword for those dogs. Think about it, although we help a lot of poor dogs on the street, it will also make more people misunderstand. They will think that it's not a big deal to abandon their pets, because there are relief centers there to help take care of them. Fong Beibei turned around and said to Poplar Fruit very seriously, you don't know, but once, after the newspaper reported that the relief center's intake had greatly increased, many people went directly to the relief center and asked Uncle De to take their pets. Although many people would abandon their pets regardless of whether there is an aid station or not, there are still some people who are hesitant. On one hand, they think about their heavy burden, and on the other hand, they think that it's immoral to abandon their good companions. However, with the aid station as an additional option, they don't even have the slightest mental struggle. Fang Beibei sighed. Poplar Fruit was silent. Fong Beibei's words reminded him of a report about the Baby Safety Island, which was actually the island for abandoned babies, that he had seen some time ago. The main purpose of such a kind measure was to increase the survival rate of abandoned babies and ensure the safety of abandoned babies. However, wasn't this also a covert condoning of the abandonment of babies? So, an appropriate amount of donation is a form of compassion. If you go beyond this limit, you'll turn a good thing into a bad thing, Fong Beibei said with some sadness. A small stream flows a long stream. Poplar Fruit comforted her. Now that you have so much money, you can slowly do the public welfare that you wanted to do before, and you can do it for a long time. That's right. Poplar Fruit laughed. You can't leave me behind. We agreed to go together. How did it become you donating alone? No way, I'll take half of it. Mph, Fong Beibei's mood improved a little. She raised her head proudly and laughed. You're kind. That's right. After knowing you for so long, all the strange uncles have been influenced by you to become good people. Poplar Fruit glanced at Fong Beibei's beautiful face from the rearview mirror and laughed. Good people are also strange uncles. Chapter 263. They didn't manage to go to Citibank. In the end, they went to one of the 4 big banks in China. This was Poplar Fruit's suggestion. Citibank didn't have many branches. There were only a few in the downtown area of Yangcheng. They couldn't find any in remote areas. Uncle De and the others were old, so they should be more used to local banks. Fang Beibei sat in the front passenger seat and looked at the scenery outside the window. She suddenly turned her head and said to Yang Guo, Uncle, you spent a lot of money to buy this car, right? Poplar Fruit's heart skipped a beat. Not good. But he still answered honestly, luckily, someone recommended it to me. It's a lot cheaper than the market price. It's a lot cheaper, but it's still $1 million. Fong Beibei seriously counted with her fingers and said to Poplar Fruit, other than being big, cool, and satisfying your vanity, what else can you do with this foreign car? What's the difference between it and a domestic car that costs 100,000? Poplar Fruit focused on driving. Even though his EQ was low and he had a lot to say, he still vaguely felt that it was irrational to argue with Fong Beibei at this time. Fong Beibei continued, look, my dad bought a BYD in 2005. It's almost 10 years old now, but isn't it still very happy on the road? So, foreign cars are just famous, but in essence, there's no difference between them and our domestic cars. You spent a lot of money to support them. Poplar Fruit kept ridiculing Fong Beibei in his heart. On the surface, he still smiled and nodded. Fong Beibei was very happy to see him act like a good student. Under Fong Beibei's nagging, Poplar Fruit and the others finally arrived at the aid station. Fong Beibei happily ran down to find Uncle De and Grandma Liu. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki and followed behind. As for Goldie, it couldn't hold back anymore. As soon as it got out of the car, it ran around Poplar Fruit and the others happily. She guessed that Goldie had just been born at that time, and it was too small. This time, it didn't seem to have any homesickness or familiarity. Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit's donation made the two elders very happy. They took out a red merit book and wrote it down for Poplar Fruit and the others. The merit book didn't say how much money one had to donate before it could be written down. Even if one donated a few hundred or tens of dollars, the old man would still seriously add it in. However, Yang Guo found that the 20,000 yuan she donated last year was still on the top of the left-hand page. After a few months, the aid station's donation income was less than 2,000 yuan. Compared to the large amount of expenses, this little bit of money was too insignificant. Looking at the few lines of scribbled words, Poplar Fruit's heart was heavy. The so-called small stream flows long, it really should be like this. Poplar Fruit somewhat understood why Fong Beibei was so against him buying a luxury car. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit's dignified expression and there was a faint sadness on her face. The only ones who weren't affected by Poplar Fruit's mood were Kiki and Goldie, the two little ones. Kiki had been struggling to get down. At this time, Poplar Fruit patted his head. He had forgotten to carry the baby walker down. Seeing that Fong Beibei was going to carry a heavy bucket of dog food, Poplar Fruit quickly stopped in front of her and said with a smile, "Leave all the work to me. You can guide by the side and take a look at Kiki." Poplar Fruit didn't allow any explanation and stuffed Kiki into Fong Beibei's arms. Then, he rolled up his sleeves and picked up 2 buckets of dog food at the same time, one on the left and one on the right, and walked to the left passage. "Wrong, wrong." Fong Beibei laughed and shouted from behind. "Go to the right." Her laughter was like a wind chime, floating with the breath of youth. However, her laughter soon stopped abruptly, because Kiki, who had been struggling for a long time, finally impatiently put her finger into Fong Beibei's mouth. Fong Beibei spat and patted Kiki's little butt. She pretended to be angry and said, "Kiki, you are being naughty again." Poplar Fruit had to scoop rice for hundreds of dogs. This work was not easy, and he had to distribute it evenly. Otherwise, the dogs who didn't get any dog food would be hungry later. Poplar Fruit was not very good at math. Fong Beibei, while holding Kiki, who was running around, looked out. If there was too much food, she would immediately remind Poplar Fruit. Fong Beibei was also not easy. She had to lead Kiki, who was too energetic. Kiki was chasing after Gold's footsteps. Gold, who had entered the big kennel, was completely wild. He ran around and kept raising his forelegs to hit the dog cage. Generally speaking, most dogs would think that Gold was coming over to snatch the food. Then, when Gold made such a fuss, they would immediately stand up and slap the cage with their forelimbs. After teasing them, Gold would immediately change its target and look for the next target to tease. For a time, Gold was running wild. Kiki pulled Fong Beibei and screamed behind him. The whole kennel was in a mess, and the dogs barking came one after another. Of course, there were also some dogs who were too lazy to care about Gold. They silently lay in the cage, thinking about life. However, Poplar Fruit found that the Samoyed he saw last year had disappeared. He didn't know if it really died of depression. Poplar Fruit didn't ask Fong Beibei, because it would only evoke sadness. "Papa." Kiki didn't know when she came to Poplar Fruit's side, looking up at her father with her pure and innocent big eyes. Poplar Fruit glanced at Fong Beibei, who was sweating at the back, then squatted down with a smile and asked Kiki, "What's wrong?" He didn't touch Kiki's head, because his hands were a little dirty. "Open, open," Kiki said in a childish voice, but her expression was very serious. "What?" Poplar Fruit froze for a moment, looked at the direction where Kiki was looking, and asked, "Kiki, do you want Dad to open the cage?" "Open, open." Kiki suddenly waved her small hand and pointed in a circle. If Kiki was wearing a white and flawless ballet dress, her circle just now would have really captivated many dance enthusiasts. In Poplar Fruit's eyes, his daughter's waving small hand, at that moment, seemed to have turned into a pair of light wings. The radiance of an angel appeared on her face. "Open all of them?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Kiki pursed her lips and nodded her small head. Poplar Fruit opened his mouth, and then looked helplessly at Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei smiled, she squatted down, hugged Kiki in her arms, and kissed her little face, and then said, "Beibei sister knows that Kiki has a good heart, I want these dogs to be able to run freely like gold. But now is not the time for the dogs to come out to play, they need to eat their fill, and then take a sweet nap. Only in the afternoon can they come out to play happily. Fong Beibei said softly. Kiki, don't you think so? Kiki blinked her big eyes in confusion. She did not quite understand Fong Beibei's words, but she could feel the kindness in Fong Beibei's tone, and finally smiled. While struggling, she waved at Gold. Chapter 264. Yarrow de Hua attached great importance to this conference. Although he planned to hold a quarterly conference every 3 months, this was, after all, the first national conference since Cinder Translation expanded. Under Yarrow de Hua's instructions, Cinder Translation Head Office held this event as an annual conference. Not only were there a lot of people participating in addition to the regional managers, branch managers, and all the gold medal translators who had joined the company, but the scale of the event was also relatively large. Cinder Translation had directly booked a resort in Shuyue, and they would be staying there for 2 days and 3 nights. Poplar Fruit, as the vice president of the translation department, did not have the awareness of a vice president. He did not go to the welcome party on the first night. In his mind, this position only had one mission, and that was to help Yarrow de Hua watch over the team and prevent unruly situations from occurring. That was enough. As for the parties for eating, drinking, and having fun, Poplar Fruit, who had been idle for a year, was too lazy to go and did not want to go. As a result, when Poplar Fruit casually sat on the rostrum during the meeting the next day, the managers from all the regions and the top interpreters from the minority languages were all shocked. Who's this? This was the most popular question among the crowd. There are many thorns below, you should be careful. Sitting next to Poplar Fruit, the vice president of the translation department, Laro Jiqiong, who was in charge of minority languages, turned off the microphone and whispered to Poplar Fruit. Laro Jiqiong was a veteran who had followed Yarrow de Hua for many years. When the company was not big, he had been a small middle-level cadre in the translation department because his language skills were not good. He had been doing some coordination and planning work. This time, taking advantage of the expansion of Cinder Translation, he became the vice president of the translation department, and he was even the vice president of the core department. He could be said to be in charge of a large team. It could be said that he had reached the sky in a single bound. However, he also knew that in the translation industry, qualifications were not the most important thing. In the end, what mattered was one's ability, and what he lacked was ability. Although he was diligent and had a high talent in management, he was not confident in managing a group of top interpreters who were stronger than him in terms of ability. Later, Yarrow de Hua signed Poplar Fruit, who was also the deputy general manager of the interpreters department. In terms of responsibilities, Poplar Fruit was on the same level as Yarrow de Hua. At that time, there were all kinds of rumors in the company, saying that Yarrow de Hua did not trust Laro Jiqiong and wanted to plant spies around him. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be able to eat or sleep. However, Laro Jiqiong was different. When he received this news, he was not worried. Instead, he was overjoyed. Others might not know who the Poplar Fruit was, but Laro Jiqiong couldn't be more familiar with the Poplar Fruit. Do you know who told Yarrow de Hua about Poplar Fruit completing the first small language mission? That's right, it was Laro Jiqiong. Laro Jiqiong had seen Poplar Fruit's growth over the past year. Everyone knew that his English was exceptionally good, but he was also a gold medal interpreter in almost 10 small languages. Laro Jiqiong could still vividly remember the process of Yang Guo going from 0 to invincible and invincible in conquering the various small language fortresses one after another. In the face of such a monster, Laro Jiqiong could not even feel jealous. Not to mention that Poplar Fruit was on the same level as him. Even if it were him, he would not complain at all. However, he was happy because he understood Poplar Fruit. Last year, Boss Yarrow had tried to recruit Poplar Fruit many times, but to no avail. Although he did not know why he succeeded this year, according to his understanding of Poplar Fruit would definitely not interfere with his work. This was because Poplar Fruit was an indifferent person. If he wanted to fight, why would he wait until now? Later on, he went to visit Poplar Fruit several times, and the facts proved his conjecture. What made him even happier was that with Poplar Fruit backing him up and suppressing these arrogant gold medal interpreters, his management skills would definitely be able to be put to good use. Not only would he not have any conflict with Poplar Fruit, but they could even faintly complement each other. After hearing Laro Jichong's words, Poplar Fruit smiled. He turned on the microphone and tapped it lightly. As expected of a resort, the sound system in this large conference room was very good. With just a light tap, the entire conference room could hear the sound of banging. As if falling into a beehive, the buzzing conference room suddenly became silent. Everyone sitting in the audience shut their mouths and looked up, wanting to hear what Poplar Fruit, this unfamiliar face, had to say. "Sorry, I didn't attend yesterday's cocktail party because I had something to do." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Everyone here may not be familiar with me, so I'll introduce myself to everyone here." The 180 people in the audience all stared at Poplar Fruit. However, for Poplar Fruit, who had already experienced the big scene of a press conference, there was no psychological pressure. With a charming and confident look on his face, he smiled calmly and said, "My name is Poplar Fruit, and my position is the Deputy General Manager of the Interpreter Department. My duties," he glanced at Laro Jichong, then continued with a smile, "are to assist in managing the small language department under CEO Laro." Laro Jichong paused for a moment, then he immediately understood that Poplar Fruit took a step back because he was worried about weakening his prestige. The gratitude in his heart was surging like a mountain collapsing and the sea splitting. Seeing that Laro Jichong did not refute, the audience was in an uproar. They never thought that the person who went up not only was not a mistake, but also became their deputy general manager, the other deputy general manager that Yaro Dehua mentioned at the cocktail party. So young. Could he be a relative of the boss? Forget about Laro Jichong, he also wants to lead us? There was a lot of discussion in the audience, and it was getting louder and louder. There was even a feeling that Poplar Fruit on the stage could not hear them. As an employee, if there was any dissatisfaction, it was not appropriate to directly conflict with the superiors. The regional managers who were well versed in this field were silent. This group of old foxes knew that the people they brought were not easy to deal with, so they all squatted on the side to watch the show. There was a gold medal interpreter in his early 30s, probably with a very low EQ. Under the urging of the people next to him, he stood up and pointed at Poplar Fruit and scolded, "Is this how Cinder starts a company? Finding a young man who doesn't know anything to blindly give orders? Even a family business should not trample on people like this, right?" As soon as he said this, the audience suddenly quieted down. In fact, this young gold medal interpreter had said what was in their hearts. It was just that the hunter would shoot the bird that stood out. Moreover, he was a newly appointed official. When he was punished as an example to others, other than his own manager whose face turned green, the others looked at him gloatingly and secretly guessed what would happen to him. Laro Jichong's face sank. He felt that he was losing face. He did not expect this group of people to not give him any face. Even a troublemaker would not go around behaving atrociously like this, right? Everyone, please use your votes to smash the paw. Chapter 265. Xiong Shihua, what are you doing? His manager hurriedly grabbed his hand and scolded, "What are you doing? Sit down." "No." Xiong Shihua straightened his neck, straightened his back, and stubbornly looked at Poplar Fruit and said, "If Shindar doesn't give us an explanation today, I won't work here. I came to Shindar because I believe that Shindar will provide us translators with a good platform. If President Yarrow is so muddle-headed as to use a relative who hasn't even grown hair to criticize our work, then what's the point of staying in this place?" "You're a little too straightforward with your words," said Qin Wentian. Poplar Fruit, who was sitting on the rostrum, did not wait for Laro Jichong to come out and smooth things over. He suddenly said, "But I like it." The audience, including Laro Jichong, was stunned. They were confused. What did Poplar Fruit mean by this? The other party had already slapped him in the face, and he still said he liked it. Poplar Fruit smiled, pulled the microphone from the short stand, stood up, and walked down the rostrum. Under everyone's anxious gazes, he walked towards Xiong Shihua and said with a smile, "In this world, there are 3 types of people who can do things. The first type is those with connections, the second type is those with ability, and the third type is those with talent. You can become a gold medal translator of Shindar, and dare to stand up and question me. This shows that you are talented. Talented people dare to speak out righteously, although it is easy to offend people. Poplar Fruit smiled, but he has his own opinions, and what this society lacks the most is independent opinions. So I like it very much. You said so much, Xiong Shihua glared and said stiffly, are you trying to confuse me? Then prove that you are someone with connections and can do things. Let me tell you, everyone here deals with words. No matter how glib your tongue is, it is useless. On the contrary. Poplar Fruit smiled, looked into his eyes, and said sincerely, not only am I not a relative of President Yao, but I also don't have any other connections to help me sit in the position of vice president. Then you are the so-called person with ability. Xiong Shihua asked disdainfully, you have management ability, so you want to lead us? You want a layman to guide an expert? Mr. Laro is more talented in languages than you, although he's not that good either. Everyone knew that he was mocking Poplar Fruit, but his words were laced with sarcasm. He even offended Laro Jiqiong. Haha. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, you're wrong. I'm not a capable person. I don't know how to manage, and I've never managed before. Besides, with President Laro, who is so good at management, why do we need another vice president in charge of management? That's right, isn't this an unnecessary move? That's what I wanted to ask you too. Xiong Shihua still asked stiffly. Ah. Suddenly, a scream came from a corner, attracting everyone's attention. There was a girl with black-rimmed glasses sitting there, blushing and covering her mouth. I suddenly remembered. Isn't Poplar Fruit the #1 interpreter in the company that President Yarrow mentioned in the newspaper? She whispered softly. However, because the meeting room was quiet, her voice was still heard by many people. Although it was more than half a year ago, Poplar Fruit's incident was an important promotion point for Cinder when they took their first step into the national market. When she said that, many people who paid attention to the industry recalled it. That's right. Poplar Fruit, so it's him, he's so young. He was already #1 at that time. Someone sighed. TSK, #1? That's only in Guangdong province. At most, he's #1 in Huanan. Back then, Cinder didn't even come to our region. Someone commented in disdain. He probably won't be that good in the national market. In terms of education resources, Beijing and Shanghai were far better than Guangzhou. Therefore, it was common for people from Huanan and Huanan to look down on interpreters from other regions. That's not right. Someone suddenly remembered and questioned, I remember that he's a gold medalist in English. Why is he here? This voice clearly entered Xiong Shihua's ears. He immediately grabbed onto it and questioned Poplar Fruit, fine, you're also a gold medalist. I believe that you're a capable person, but you're a gold medalist in English. Why are you in charge of our small language department? Isn't this just a layman guiding an expert? Here, I'd like to interrupt. Laro Jiqiong patted the microphone and smiled. You guys don't know this, but our President Yang is a language genius. Not only does he know English, but he also knows many other small languages, even if he knows other languages, so what? Can he guide us? There are many people in the country who can speak 2 foreign languages. Other than French, I also know English. Everyone has their own specialization. How can an English learner like him help us? Xiong Shihua shouted before Laro Jiqiong could finish. You're a gold medalist in French. Poplar Fruit still asked with a smile. Yes, what's wrong? Xiong Shihua angrily looked at Poplar Fruit and asked, do you also want to question my ability? Hee, that won't happen. I believe that the company's rating is fair and just. Poplar Fruit laughed, you said that a layman can't guide an expert. Then take you as an example. Tell me, what level do I need to reach to guide you? Take me as an example. Xiong Shihua looked puzzled and said, then your French must be better than mine. How can I prove that my French is better than yours? By the way, I also know a little French. Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. A little French is enough. Xiong Shihua shook his head and said, then I'll give you a chance. Look at him saying, "I'll give you a chance." His momentum was a bit too arrogant. However, Poplar Fruit was not angry. He still looked calm, as if everything was under control. "Let's not compete in translation. It's too troublesome and a waste of everyone's time." Xiong Shihua said, "Let's compete in French interpretation. Is there anyone here who knows French?" No one answered. Of course, it was impossible for there to be no one. He looked around and looked at a middle-aged man and said, "Mr. Ding, yesterday at the cocktail party, you were also a gold medalist in French, right? Can I trouble you to be a judge for us?" The middle-aged man was stunned and sat there reluctantly. He turned his head and looked helplessly at his colleagues who were also gold medalists in French. They all looked away, unwilling to get involved in this dispute. Poplar Fruit glanced at his badge and said with a smile, "Mr. Ding Ku, it's okay." Ding Ku regretted it. He shouldn't have drunk 2 more glasses of red wine yesterday. He was dizzy and went around greeting people. He even provoked this hothead. Now that Poplar Fruit had spoken, he had to bite the bullet and stand up. "Everyone, take your votes and throw them at the poor." Chapter 266. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Well, the referee is here. Tell me, how do you want to compete?" Xiong Shihua said seriously, "I won't limit you. Let's do it this way. Each of us will translate an article. If you translate better than me, then I will submit to your management. In the future, if you say 1, I won't say 4, but if you don't translate as well as me, then I'm sorry, I don't recognize you as my leader. Okay, it's a deal. If I can't beat you, I will resign as the vice president, and I will recommend you to President Yarrow to take over my position." Yang Guo liked people like Xiong Shihua more and more. Although it was easy for him to say things that made people embarrassed, he was a straightforward person. He didn't beat around the bush and didn't play tricks. "It's a deal." Xiong Shihua patted Poplar Fruit's outstretched palm. Poplar Fruit asked, "What article to translate?" "To be fair," Xiong Shihua said. "Teacher Ding, please use your mobile phone to go online. Any website will do. Find 2 recent news reports of similar length and read them out separately. We will translate 1 article each." Ding Ku saw that Poplar Fruit also nodded, so he had to take out his mobile phone and check. He opened 2 websites, and after 3 or 4 minutes, he raised his head and said, "It's done. Do you want to go first, or should I?" Poplar Fruit looked at Xiong Shihua and asked. "I'll go first." Xiong Shihua said confidently. He believed in his ability and thought that Poplar Fruit would take the initiative to retreat after seeing his performance. Translation and interpretation were indeed 2 different professions, but in the field of small languages where interpreters were scarce, interpreters didn't distinguish them so clearly. For example, Xiong Shihua would also translate for a few days if someone invited him, so he was very confident in his interpretation ability. "Then I'll start reading." Ding Ku looked at Xiong Shihua, then focused on the mobile phone screen and began to read the first news article. Ding Ku's speech speed was not fast, it was slower than normal speech, and he even paused every 2 sentences. The pause was to give Xiong Shihua time to translate. As a gold medal French interpreter, Xiong Shihua's ability was naturally not bad. He looked at Ding Ku, but his eyes were not focused, and a string of French slipped out of his mouth. Xiong Shihua's French pronunciation was very standard, and his ability to use words and make sentences was not bad. It could be said that he was good enough to be a French teacher in a university. After translating the entire article, Xiong Shihua's translation was very smooth except for a few sentences. It might not be strict enough, but for an interpreter, this was already very good. The dozen or so people present who knew French applauded one after another. After translating, Xiong Shihua's eyes finally focused. He wiped his sweat. For this competition, he still put in his best effort. Although he was not very interested in the position of Poplar Fruit's vice president, he still wanted to frustrate Poplar Fruit's spirit and let him understand who the best French gold medal interpreter was. He was a little extreme again. Looking at Poplar Fruit with a little pride, Xiong Shihua was looking forward to the shock, retreat, and even worship of Poplar Fruit. However, he was going to be disappointed, because Yang Guo's expression was still as calm as ever, as if all his efforts just now were nothing more than the most common fallen leaves in the autumn wind, and there was nothing worthy of his attention. Xiong Shihua looked at Poplar Fruit's eyes with a sense of anger. However, Poplar Fruit did not pay attention to him. He nodded to Ding Ku and said with a smile, "Mr. Ding, I am also ready. You can read the next article." The people around were stunned, especially the French gold medal interpreters. They looked at Poplar Fruit in disbelief. There was already Xiong Shihua in front of him, and Poplar Fruit still wanted to humiliate himself by challenging him? Or was he pretending to be calm and stubbornly refusing to admit defeat? Ding Ku's right thumb swiped on the phone, clicked on the second article, and then began to read. Before he finished reading the first sentence, Poplar Fruit began to translate, which made Ding Ku stunned. He raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit with his mouth open. He seemed to be very puzzled and asked, "Mr. Yang, you can't be like this. I haven't stopped yet. Can't you remember 2 sentences? You want to translate 1 sentence at a time?" Poplar Fruit saw that he stopped reading, so he stopped and said with a smile, "Why don't you continue? It's okay. You read yours, and I will flip mine. You don't have to stop. Just read from top to bottom." After starting again, everyone was surprised to find that Poplar Fruit was doing simultaneous translation. Basically, when Ding Ku read half a sentence, Poplar Fruit began to translate. If Ding Ku did not stop, Poplar Fruit did not stop either. Although there was a difference of 1 or 2 seconds, wasn't this synchronous interpretation? Many people present did not understand French, but they were all in the language industry. They still had the ability to distinguish between Xiong Shihua and Poplar Fruit, whose spoken language was better. Compared with Xiong Shihua's standard, Poplar Fruit's fluent spoken language was really much better. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's spoken language had a foreign flavor, unlike Xiong Shihua, who sounded like a non-native speaker. Others did not understand, but Xiong Shihua understood. He was now staring straight at Poplar Fruit's mouth. He could not believe that the French that sounded as good as the foreign French teacher when he was in school came from Poplar Fruit's mouth. If his eyes were covered, he would not believe that the person who said these words was not a Frenchman. As for whether the translation was correct or not, Xiong Shihua tried to find some shortcomings of Poplar Fruit from this in the first 10 sentences, but all he heard was that Poplar Fruit was perfect. Poplar Fruit's translation was really good. Xiong Shihua even felt that even if he had enough time to translate slowly in the dictionary, he would not be able to do such a good translation. Poplar Fruit's translation was based on the terrifying synchronous translation. If this competition was not proposed by him, and Ding Ku, who was the referee, was chosen by him, Xiong Shihua would have thought that Poplar Fruit was prepared in advance to trap him. After Poplar Fruit finished translating, the surroundings were so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Unlike when Xiong Shihua had just finished translating, there were many people who understood French applauding. Now, everyone was looking at Poplar Fruit with shock and doubt. Is there really someone so good? To be able to master 2 languages so well? This was the voice of most people. You don't have to say anything. Xiong Shihua suddenly walked out of his seat and walked in front of Poplar Fruit. He bowed deeply, and then looked seriously at Poplar Fruit and said, "President Yang, if you agree to bet, you must accept your loss. Your French is indeed better than mine, and much better. Xiong Shihua admits defeat. Just now, it was my fault. In the future, I, Xiong Shihua, will absolutely obey your instructions. In addition, in the study and work of French, I hope that I can learn more from President Yang in the future. Everyone, use your votes to smash the paw." Chapter 267. Poplar Fruit put down the microphone and patted Xiong Shihua's arm. "In the company. Don't worry, we will have many opportunities to communicate in the future." Poplar Fruit was relieved that he had dealt with the troublemaker. He was about to leave. "Wait, Mr. Yang, wait." Suddenly, someone stood up and shouted. Not only Poplar Fruit, but many others frowned and looked at the guy. It was reasonable for Xiong Shihua to be alone, but the matter had already been settled. What was the meaning of this? His eyes shone with greed as he said, "Hello, Mr. Yang. I'm Pang Dingkang, the manager of the Jincheng branch. I'm also a gold medal Arabic interpreter. Yang Guo looked at him for 2 seconds and a familiar smile appeared on her face. Oh, Manager Pang, do you have any questions? No, I don't have any questions. I'm just a little confused. Pang Dingkang chuckled. Mr. Yang, you are indeed very good at English and French. We all admit that. However, French is not the only language you speak. Do you think you can convince us that you are better than Mr. Yang? Otherwise, what's the difference between this and Xiong Shihua's suggestion of a layman guiding an expert? Oh, Manager Pang, you want to compete with me in Arabic? That way, you won't be dissatisfied, right? Yang Guo was a little angry in his heart, but he still asked with a smile. His tone was the same as usual, without any fluctuations. Of course, I won't make a fuss. Let's compete according to Xiong Shihua's suggestion. If Mr. Yang wins, I, Old Pang, will be your man. Pang Dingkang patted his chest as he spoke. As he spoke, his small eyes peeked at Poplar Fruit and the others. Arabic was a relatively unpopular minority language. Pang Dingkang was sure that even if Poplar Fruit knew it, he would not be better than him. After all, as someone who majored in Arabic, he knew how difficult it was to learn Arabic. It was almost impossible to learn so many other languages and still be able to achieve the same level of proficiency in Arabic as him. Poplar Fruit didn't even need to think before he agreed. All right, let's compete. Who will be the referee? Wait, Director Yang. Pang Dingkang's eyes flickered as he asked, is the condition you mentioned to your friend still valid? If I beat you, your position will be mine. Yes. If you beat me, I will recommend you to Vice President Yao. Poplar Fruit smiled and said word by word. Laro Jiqiong, who was on the rostrum, did not say a word. He looked at Pang Dingkang angrily. If Xiong Zhihua was just a troublemaker who refused to be disciplined, then Pang Dingkang had other intentions. Laro Jiqiong made a mental note of Pang Dingkang's name. In his heart, Pang Dingkang was already a dead man. All right, then, let's look for Old Wan, you also know Arabic. Can you be the referee? Pang Dingkang was overjoyed. He looked around and asked loudly. Wait, let's not do this time. Who is learning Arabic? Poplar Fruit waved his hand and asked. Although he didn't say it explicitly, it was obvious that he didn't trust the person that Pang Dingkang had found. The person who had just stood up looked at Poplar Fruit awkwardly. He didn't know whether to sit or stand. At this time, 5 or 6 Arabic gold translators raised their hands at Poplar Fruit's question. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, please, everyone, be the referee. He turned to look at Xiong Shihua and said with a smile, Brother Xiong, can I trouble you to help me find 2 new articles? No problem. Xiong Shihua stood up again and said loudly. He glanced at Pang Dingkang and took out his phone to find 2 articles. Then, he said, okay, who's going first? Manager Pang, why don't you go first? Poplar Fruit looked at Pang Dingkang and asked with a smile. Pang Dingkang, whose forehead was covered in sweat, nodded reluctantly. This was a big change from his previous plan. He didn't care about wiping the sweat off his forehead. Instead, he focused on listening to Xiong Shihua. Wait. Pang Dingkang interrupted Xiong Shihua before he could finish reading. He looked at Poplar Fruit awkwardly and said, it's a little too far away. I can't hear you clearly. You're reading too fast. Brother Xiong, please read it louder so that everyone can be quiet, Poplar Fruit said. Read it slowly. Xiong Shihua read aloud. Just like Ding Ku, he paused after every 2 sentences. Pang Dingkang started to interpret, but everyone could tell that he was not as fluent as Xiong Shihua even though he was speaking a different language. Pang Dingkang was stuttering as he translated. He even lowered his voice in some parts in an attempt to muddle through. He might have been able to fool a layman, but everyone present was well versed in languages. Who couldn't tell what he was trying to say? Not to mention the others, even the top Arabic translators frowned. After he finished translating the article, Pang Dingkang wiped his sweat and smiled awkwardly. Mr. Yang, it's your turn. His plan had gone awry. He could only pray that Poplar Fruit was worse than him. Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at Xiong Shahua. Xiong Shahua didn't start reading immediately. He raised his head and asked Poplar Fruit, "Mr. Yang, what's yours?" "Just like before. Read it at a normal speed. Don't pause," Poplar Fruit answered confidently. Pang Dingkang panicked when he heard Poplar Fruit's words. Poplar Fruit's performance was still amazing. His Arabic was 100 times more fluent than Pang Dingkang's. After listening to Poplar Fruit's translation, everyone applauded, regardless of whether they understood Arabic or not. Was there a need to compare? This was a difference that could be heard clearly. The Arabic gold medal translators sitting around them all had looks of admiration in their eyes. Was there a need to say anything more? Before they could announce the result, Pang Dingkang sighed and said, "Mr. Yang, you're amazing." He sat down and didn't dare to raise his head again. Compared to Xiong Shahua, Pang Dingkang was a sore loser. He didn't even admit defeat. However, everyone knew that he wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble. As mentioned before, the translation industry was a circle that placed a lot of emphasis on strength. Those without strength would find it difficult to be recognized. Those with strength would quickly be valued and supported. Yang Guo had defeated 2 experts in a row, proving her amazing ability in the 2 minor languages. The eyes of the gold medal interpreters present were now looking at Yang Guo in a very different light. Many of them had a fanatical look in their eyes. Poplar Fruit didn't return to the rostrum. Instead, he stood in the middle of the crowd with a smile. He asked in a low voice, "Who else?" Chapter 268. Who else? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Who else wants to challenge me? Of course, there are so many different languages in the world. Poplar Fruit is not a machine. The languages that I know are. Poplar Fruit counted with his fingers. The European languages include French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Russian, Swedish, and Dutch. The Asian languages include Korean, Japanese, Thai, Nanyu, and Hindi. That's all I know at the moment. Within the range that Poplar Fruit knows, everyone can compete with me. He only learned Hindi before he went abroad. There were many Hindi people in the United States. Poplar Fruit even chatted with a few of them. The comments that he got were still very good. Poplar Fruit's words shocked everyone present. 13 languages? Poplar Fruit, are you trying to defy the natural order? There were many people in the world who knew many languages, but they were basically old pedants who hid in the ivory tower. In such an impetuous society, knowing English basically meant that one would not have to worry about food and clothing. Knowing 2 or 3 foreign languages could make a lot of money. No matter how many foreign languages one knew, it would not increase the number of times. Learning 13 languages was definitely a pain in the ass for him to be bored to death. However, for Poplar Fruit, this was not the case. In fact, 13 languages were not that difficult for Poplar Fruit. For example, Poplar Fruit had learned French before, so it was easy for him to pick it up. Spanish was similar to Portuguese. It would only take a few days to learn a second language after learning one. As for the Asian languages, Japanese and Nanyu, many of their language habits were similar to Chinese. In comparison, it was much faster to learn. Thai and Hindi evolved from ancient Sanskrit. There were many similarities between the two. Although it was a bit of a headache to learn, it was easier to learn after mastering the pronunciation. Therefore, Poplar Fruit felt that since God gave him such a strong language talent, why not make full use of it? If he didn't use it, it would be a waste. Among all the people present, only Lao Jiqiong did not express any surprise. Although compared to his understanding of Poplar Fruit also knew Hindi, Lao Jiqiong did not show any surprise. However, in the face of the monstrous Poplar Fruit, he was so numb that he couldn't be surprised anymore. After hearing Poplar Fruit count so many languages, one person couldn't help but stand up. "Hello, Director Yang." The person who stood up was a middle-aged man. He wasn't tall and was dressed plainly in a grey suit. He didn't look like a flamboyant person. Seeing that Poplar Fruit's eyes were focused on him, he was somewhat flustered. Breathing heavily, he said, "Chief Yang, My name is Wang Jinping. I'm a Nanyu translator. The gold medal translator of Western Guangdong province. Brother Wang, don't worry. Speak slowly. Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted him. I don't want to compete with you, nor do I want to compete with you for your position. I just feel that it's strange that you've learned so many popular languages, but you actually understand our business volume and some of the less popular languages. Wang Jinping said, so I want to discuss this Nanyu language with you, Mr. Yang. From his tone, one could tell that he was still somewhat unconvinced. The reason was obvious. The Nanyu language was a small language that was unpopular to the point that it couldn't be more unpopular. There weren't many people who were willing to learn and study it. Wang Jinping was able to become a gold medal translator. This road could be said to be difficult. But Poplar Fruit shamelessly said that after learning so many languages, he also learned Nanyu language. Moreover, he said that he was confident that his Nanyu language was unrivaled. How could Wang Jinping accept this? However, Director Yang, you really don't misunderstand. We are just having a small competition. I am not unconvinced by your management. You can rest assured that no matter the result, I will work very hard. Wang Jinping nervously shook his hand and said, It's okay. Poplar Fruit smiled, let's give it a try. Just treat it as an academic discussion. To be honest, after learning Nanyu language, I haven't communicated with our domestic scholars. Thank you, Brother Wang, for giving me this opportunity. Wang Jinping directly started a conversation in Nanyu language. This made Poplar Fruit a little surprised because Wang Jinping didn't follow the previous model of translating the news. Wang Jinping's Nanyu language was quite fluent. Although there was no other Nanyu language translator present, it was quite comfortable to listen to. Just based on the first impression, it was enough to give him full marks. Poplar Fruit was not to be outdone. He blurted out the same fluent Nanyu language. At this time, Wang Jinping's eyes showed a surprised expression. He asked in Nanyu language, Director Yang, have you also lived in Nanyu? I didn't expect your Nanyu language to be so authentic. After Wang Jinping graduated from university, he joined a state-owned enterprise. As the translator of their factory leader, he settled in Nanyu country. 5 years of living in Nanyu country not only trained his Nanyu language level, but also honed his accent to be no different from a local. And Poplar Fruit also spoke authentic Nanyu language, which made him very surprised. Poplar Fruit smiled and shook his head. He told him, I have never been to Nanyu country, but I met a Nanyu friend on the internet who was willing to chat with me. So I learned the standard pronunciation of Nanyu language from him. Wang Jinping and Poplar Fruit chatted in Nanyu language for 10 minutes. This made Poplar Fruit a lot interested in him. Because Wang Jinping's Nanyu language didn't just stop at the level of speaking. From the conversation, Poplar Fruit could feel that Wang Jinping's research on Nanyu language was very in-depth. Wang Jinping had read a lot of Nanyu classics. This was something that Poplar Fruit couldn't do. At most, he knew that there were some titles and history, but he didn't have the time or resources to read them one by one. But for Wang Jinping, who was only a commercial translator, to be able to spend so much time and effort to delve into the knowledge of a language, this was an amazing thing. Just when Poplar Fruit was interested in Wang Jinping and wanted to discuss with him in depth, Wang Jinping suddenly changed to Chinese. He sighed softly and said, Director Yang, you are right. I am not as good as you in Nanyu language. The audience was a little confused by Wang Jinping's sudden retreat. Poplar Fruit was also surprised. He didn't think that he won. In the conversation, the two of them were at most evenly matched. So he asked, Brother Wang, why do you say that? We didn't decide the winner. No, Director Yang. I know that my reaction is not good enough. Your Nanyu language level is not worse than mine. But once the written test starts, I can't do simultaneous interpretation. But you should have no problem, so I still lost. Wang Jinping shook his head and said, You can't say that. We are both translators. What does simultaneous interpretation have to do with us? Poplar Fruit laughed. So, you didn't lose, and I didn't win. Chapter 269. Poplar Fruit looked at the 180 people present and said with a smile, "You may not understand my conversation with Wang Jinping, but I can tell you that Wang Jinping's foundation in the Nanyu language is very solid. He even gave me the feeling of a college quiz student because he is willing to put in the effort to learn and research the language he is working in. Translation is an industry that values knowledge. As a translator, if you don't always keep up with the times and learn, you will be abandoned by the market one day." Poplar Fruit said seriously, "The company is not a place to raise idlers. Don't think that you can live a life of luxury just because you have the title of a gold medal translator. The company is researching and preparing to launch a plan for gold medal translators and even an annual review of translation titles. In other words, if you don't reach the level of a gold medal translator this year and fail the annual review, you will fall to the level of a silver medal translator. The translation department is not a place for everyone to retire. As a gold medal translator of the company, you should set an example." Poplar Fruit said seriously, "Of course, people who work hard will get more opportunities than others. And these opportunities are fought for by us, Mr. Larrow, the translation department, and the employees in charge of the company's business. I know that many of you don't recognize Mr. Larrow's leadership and think that a person who has not achieved much in the translation industry cannot lead you. Therefore, the head office sent me here. My duty is to build a bridge of communication between you and CEO Larrow. I don't know anything about management, the company, or the operation of the platform, but I understand you, and CEO Larrow also hopes to understand you. Because our goal is to build a mutually beneficial platform for all of our colleagues in the translation industry. You should know this when you joined the company. So, why don't we work together to make this platform better?" Poplar Fruit said firmly. Larrow Jiqiong took the lead in applauding, followed by thunderous applause. Especially Xiong Shihua and Wang Jinping, who were impressed by Poplar Fruit, clapped so hard that people were a little worried about their palms. Poplar Fruit did not think that it was because of his words that everyone was affected. Many of the people present were leaders in their own fields. They were used to being arrogant. It would be underestimating them to be fooled by a few words. To be able to receive such an enthusiastic response, it was mainly because Yang Guo's incomparably valiant performance just now had truly shocked them. As the saying goes, there is always someone better than you. Only when you see it, will you put away your arrogance and obey the command of the strong. This was the truth. The next meeting was much smoother. Larrow Jiqiong announced the topic of this meeting: how to improve the recognition of the minority language translation industry and increase the task volume in the minority language translation industry. After that, almost everyone enthusiastically participated in the discussion. Most of the people present, except for a few managers, used to be in this industry. Not all of them were full-time translators, but they all had their own unique understanding of this industry. Therefore, once the meeting formed a heated discussion atmosphere, everyone was willing to participate in this brainstorm. Never underestimate anyone. Even if they were inconspicuous, they might have a flash of inspiration at a certain moment and bring huge benefits to the company. For example, a female translator named Zhong Yang, she was not very tall, but she put forward a huge and great suggestion. She said that since the society was not familiar with the minority language industry, why not imitate the World Expo and the Cantonese Trade Fair and hold a translation expo on minority languages? Although this suggestion was too big and could only be thought of at the moment, it might not be impossible to become a module of the company's development blueprint. If this plan was built well and could win the support of the government, it would be very important for the minority language industry and even the entire translation industry. During the lunch break, Poplar Fruit ran to the small garden outside the building, took out his phone, and looked at the missed calls. When he was competing with Xiong Shihua, he felt the phone in his trouser pocket vibrate, but because he had been in a meeting, he did not have time to check. It turned out to be Song Jiwen calling, but Song Jiwen almost never called him in the morning on weekdays. Poplar Fruit thought, did he find the whereabouts of Che Enjuan? It has been 2 or 3 days, and there should be news. He dialed his phone, and sure enough, Song Jiwen found Che Enjuan's address. He whispered excitedly on the phone, "I found this bastard. How about it? Do you want me to help you find someone to teach this guy a lesson? No need, Poplar Fruit said. Just give me the address, and I will ask him personally who ordered him to do this. How boring, leaving me to do it alone, Song Jiwen muttered. I will read the address to you, and you can take notes. Poplar Fruit really did not want Song Jiwen to participate in the martial arts world. After all, Song Jiwen was an ordinary person who only knew how to fight. If he met someone who knew martial arts, it would be easy for him to get hurt. No need to read it, I'm afraid I heard wrong. Send me a text message, Poplar Fruit said. If he read the address out loud, it would be easy to confuse it with homophones. Sending a text message was more intuitive. After hanging up the phone with Song Jiwen, Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to go back. He sat by the fountain in the center of the garden and called Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei had class today, but it was really inconvenient for Poplar Fruit to bring Kiki with him, so he could only trouble Fong Beibei to take the risk of bringing Kiki to class. Poplar Fruit was worried, so he found an opportunity to ask about the situation. Uncle, you finished the meeting? Fong Beibei asked in surprise on the phone. Not yet, I took a break at noon. I have another meeting in the afternoon, Poplar Fruit said. How is Kiki? Is she okay? Let me tell you, Kiki is too good. So good that you can't believe it. Fong Beibei said proudly. When she entered the classroom, she hugged her Barbie doll and played by the side. She was so quiet that the teacher didn't notice her for 2 periods. Oh, that's good. Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief. I'll have to trouble you to take care of her. What trouble? Kiki is super good, do you know? Fong Beibei laughed. She really didn't. Poplar Fruit ridiculed in his heart. Girls from the 90s were really trendy. She acted cute in front of the people in my class and received a big bag of snacks. In the end, she gave it all to me. Fong Beibei proudly showed off. That's because she doesn't know how to eat yet. Wait a year or 2, then see if she still shares it with you. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. If she doesn't, then it's because you didn't teach her well, Fong Beibei lectured. Chapter 270. The meeting lasted for 2 days. On the first day, each department would hold their own meeting. On the second day, they would organize and prepare. In the afternoon, they would submit their proposals and obtain financial support from the head office through the oral defense. Therefore, after eating a delicious buffet lunch, they returned to the conference room in the afternoon and continued the meeting. The capital of the English language company was strong and the market was huge. They were not so enthusiastic about financial support from the head office. On the other hand, as Wang Jinping said at the meeting, under the strong influence of the English language company, the small languages are often not valued. If we want to be recognized by others, then we have to make achievement. Everyone was working hard, trying to find a good idea to fight for more of the small language market. People thought that they could use cheap English translators, so they tried not to look for small language translators. This idea was wrong. If they wanted to be more local and gain profits, small language translators were very important. Many foreign trade companies recognized this point. However, this potential market had not been fully explored. Cinder Translation provided such a good platform for many people who relied on small translation companies or solo talents. But at the same time, many people didn't realize this and still followed their old path. The incompatibility of the two aspects also led to the current state of Shinda's translation of small languages being neither awkward nor hot. It was not difficult to find the problem. The difficult part was how to solve it. Some translators suggested to let the company advertise in the TV station. This idea was not very realistic. The TV station's advertising fee was so expensive. How much could they get back? Some translators also suggested to hold a university competition. This way, they could quickly attract the small language talents in the universities to participate and gradually build up their reputation. This proposal was feasible. But to attract people through a competition would take a long time. Moreover, it would need to be held continuously. This was not in line with the current topic. Of course, if Shinda translation was free in the future, It could also take the university route. At this time, the girl with black-rimmed glasses who was the first to recognize Poplar Fruit raised her hand high. Poplar Fruit also saw it. He nudged Laro Jichong, who was presiding over the meeting, to signal him. If you have any thoughts, just stand up and say it. We're not in a class. Everyone is welcome to speak freely. Laro Jichong smiled, pointed at the girl with black-rimmed glasses, and said kindly, "Hello everyone, my name is Chu Tong. I'm a gold medal Russian interpreter from the Jiangnan branch." Chu Tong blushed as she introduced herself shyly. "Tell me what new ideas you have," Poplar Fruit said. He pinched the end of the pen and gently tapped it on the table. He did not take notes of the meeting. What was said was stored in his mind, but he was not satisfied with all the ideas that were submitted. "My idea is that we can consider finding some internet celebrities to help us produce a series of programs," Chu Tong said. As soon as she said this, the entire crowd burst into laughter. Everyone was thinking, this girl is too funny. What kind of idea is this? It doesn't even touch the main topic. Everyone's laughter made Chu Tong's face even redder. She stood there awkwardly, pinching the corner of her clothes, wishing that there was a hole in the ground for her to crawl into. "Everyone quiet down." Laro Jichong stood up, clapped his hands and shouted. Under Laro Jichong's shout, the crowd's laughter gradually stopped. "Chu Tong, continue. Finish your thoughts," Laro Jichong said kindly. He himself also felt that this idea was a bit ridiculous, but he knew how to control people's hearts. At this time, he had to let Chu Tong continue. If he forcefully rejected Chu Tong, then everyone would be afraid of making a fool of themselves and would not dare to make any suggestions. Poplar Fruit was silent throughout the entire process. His movements did not change. He tapped the pen, but his mind was thinking about Chu Tong's ideas. With the support of the vice president, Chu Tong finally felt a little better, but her face was still red. She took a deep breath and said, "Actually, internet programs are not as worthless as you think. In modern people's fast-paced living conditions, many people are more willing to choose to watch videos on the internet, or watch short and fast-paced micromovies. For example, the internet celebrity called Shou Xiaoxing. His video has more than 10 million views. There are many other people whose self-created videos are very popular on the internet. I believe that if we can find one or a few internet celebrities to help us plan some programs, we can spend very little money and in a very short time to let more people know our name," Chu Tong said seriously. "Your idea is very good, but have you considered that the audience of their videos are mainly young people? This will not have much effect on our promotion. What's the use of only young people seeing it? We mainly hope to let more customers discover us and give us more small language tasks." A director of the translation department could not help but stand up and refute. This, Chu Tong did not consider this point. She stood there and did not know how to answer. "Let me say a few words," Poplar Fruit stood up and said with a smile. "I am also a young person." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and let the director who was nervous and wanted to apologize sit down. He smiled and said, "No need to apologize. What you just said is actually reasonable." Chu Tong's suggestion is very enlightening, but you should be the same as Director Liu. You think that people who watch internet videos are all young people. Adults still want to watch some TV series that are more stable and close to life. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "But, have you thought about it? If something that is quickly going viral on the internet is placed in front of you, no matter if you are young or middle-aged, would you consider to take a look?" "Yes." Poplar Fruit did not wait for their answer and said firmly, "Definitely. It is human nature to be curious. If it is something that everyone is interested in, I must know about it. Most people will have the same idea." I said that I am also a young person because I understand that in our current society, whether it is on the internet or in real life, young people spread information the fastest. Let me give you an example. Last year's tragic incident of Xiao Yeye, the broadcast of the news was not the reason this incident spread so quickly across the country. It was because this video was reposted by countless netizens on Weibo that it completely captured the hearts of the entire country. I can say that the effect of the news broadcast may not be as fast as the netizens reposting it. This is what I want to say with this example, Poplar Fruit said. Chapter 271. In other words, if the video we make can be shared by the netizens and the youngsters, then we are halfway to success. Poplar Fruit laughed. What's the other half? Poplar Fruit kept them in suspense and turned to ask Chu Tong. How can we let our target audience accept the message we want to spread in the video? Chu Tong moved the glasses behind her ear and guessed boldly. That's right. Poplar Fruit patted her shoulder and said, just as Supervisor Liu said, we have to consider the audience's ability to accept videos that are too frivolous, full of cliché manga plots, videos that are either Martian language or brainless dialogue, etc. These are all not qualified. Even if it has a lot of clicks, it will never be accepted by our target audience. What if we can make a video that is elegant and common? Chu Tong suddenly shouted and looked at Poplar Fruit with a face full of hope. Then we will succeed. Poplar Fruit said seriously, if we can make our company known to the world, why would we worry about not having customers? Why would we, a small language, not be valued? But here comes the question, can we come up with such a good video idea? Even if we can't, we can find those internet celebrities. They have endless creativity, they will definitely be able to make the video we want. Chu Tong said excitedly. How much would it cost to find them to make a video? At this time, Laro Jiqiong suddenly interrupted and asked. This, I don't know. When it came to the specifics, Chu Tong couldn't help but be tongue-tied. It won't cost a lot. Poplar Fruit turned around and laughed at Laro Jiqiong. The production cost of an online video is not high, tens of thousands of yuan is usually enough to invest. Of course, I think there is an exception, that is Shou Xiaoxing that Chu Tong mentioned. Poplar Fruit smiled and looked at Chu Tong and said, Chu Tong, you probably don't know, but Shou Xiaoxing has already started a business, right? He and a few others have set up a film company. Now micro-movies are very popular. Then should we consider others? Chu Tong asked. No, we want him. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, you're not the only one. I often watch his videos too. His progress in the past few years has been too fast. Although the videos he makes now are still filled with his absurd elements, his works are gradually able to capture people's hearts. They can even make you fall into deep thought after laughing out loud. He's the one we want. Poplar Fruit's words were directed at Laro Jiqiong. To be able to make a video go viral on the internet and still be wildly sought after by the netizens, it can only be called a beast. Of course, now that he has a company, we need to invest more money. How much do you think there will be? Laro Jiqiong asked. About $1 million. That's about the same for a low-budget movie. But if you want to do well, you have to be willing to spend money, Poplar Fruit advised. And if we do well, we might even be able to break even. I understand that too. Laro Jiqiong said, if we had invested in them as an advertiser and not included their dividends, do you think the money would have been less? Looking at Poplar Fruit's doubtful eyes, Laro Jiqiong explained, the lower the budget, the higher the possibility of us getting support from the head office. Moreover, we're a translation company, not an entertainment investment company. There's no need for us to participate in movie or video investments. At the end of the day, it was still a matter of money. Don't be fooled by the fact that big companies spent millions on advertisements. Those were all for the purpose of selling content and products. For a translation company with an intermediary status, it was already considered good if their annual advertising budget could reach a few million. Then we'll probably have to spend money, at least a few $100,000. I'm talking about quality, Poplar Fruit said. If it's not quality, then there's no need to continue. A price of a few $100,000 was easier for Laro Jiqiong to accept. Therefore, he got an assistant to contact Wanhe Heavenly Robe and ask the beast about the price. In the conference room, everyone began to discuss the proposal and see how to perfect it. I think. Xiong Shihua struggled to stand up from the crowd and said loudly, this video must show the coolness of our small language translation. Young people nowadays pay attention to the word cool. Only cool can make them chase after and imitate it, and only then will they have the motivation to forward it to their friends, Xiong Shihua said. Oh, then tell me, how can we show this coolness? Laro Jiqiong asked with a smile. Xiong Shihua rolled his eyes and said, our boss Yang will definitely be cool when he stands in front of the camera. The audience burst into laughter. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, why are you dragging me into this? Xiong Shihua became more and more excited as he spoke. He gestured and continued, think about it, Boss Yang is tall and handsome, and then he suddenly speaks to different foreigners in 13 languages. That's so cool. Yeah. Boss Yang, you have to do it. Everyone cheered. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly at them and said, you guys really love me too much. All right, Poplar Fruit, will go all out. If the director needs it, I'm not afraid to sacrifice my body for the company. This meeting was getting more and more joyful. Yarrow Dehua came to take a look at the back and realized that the small language department's meeting was different from the tense scene he had imagined. After walking out, he was relieved. It was the right decision to spend so much money to sign Poplar Fruit. Looking at the state of the small language department now, not only was there no division, but they were also tied together like a hemp rope. After the proposal was basically ready, the assistant also sent in some good news. Wan He was very interested in the 500,000 advertising investment from Xindar Translation. In 2 days, the main creative team would come to Yangcheng to discuss the details of the cooperation. Then the only thing left was how to turn this proposal into a proposal and get the company's financial support. This was not a simple matter. Poplar Fruit specially called Fong Beibei and told her that he would not be going back at night. He would be working with the final 5-person presentation team to prepare for the proposal presentation and debate tomorrow afternoon. The 5-person presentation team was made up of 2 gold medal interpreters and 3 planning assistants from the translation department. The most active people in the conference, Xiong Shihua and Chu Tong, were also involved. To be able to disregard the previous enmity and put Xiong Shihua in an important position, this made Xiong Shihua and the others secretly praise Yang Guo's heart. Seeing that everyone's recommendation votes are getting less and less, and that there are almost no monthly votes, Xiao Han is very depressed. Actually, there are a lot of holes in the beginning, and Xiao Han knows that. But since 2 weeks ago, a lot of the plot has started to surface. Xiao Han will also work hard to write a better story. I hope that everyone will not be stingy with their votes. Chapter 272. As an executive of the head office, Poplar Fruit was not allowed to participate. Therefore, even if he was full of enthusiasm, Poplar Fruit could only cheer them on and act as a judge, giving them good suggestions during rehearsals. The 5-man team carried the hopes of more than 100 people from the minority language team. Of course, they were under a lot of pressure. The next morning, they hurriedly wiped their faces and did not even have time to eat breakfast. They rehearsed again in front of everyone in the conference room. Everyone gave them suggestions and encouragement, which made Poplar Fruit and Laro Jiqiong very happy. Poplar Fruit secretly felt that if such a team did not succeed, then there would be no justice. Sure enough, even though Xiong Shihua was a little straightforward, even though Chu Tong was a little shy, and even though the other team members more or less made some mistakes, their sincere and straightforward presentation and creative proposal won the unanimous praise of the judges. The budget of 500,000 is not enough. I'll give you another 300,000. Yarrow Dehua finally stood up and concluded, if you don't do it, then don't do it. If you do, then do it to the best of your ability. I hope that when the video is released, every Chinese will be eager to click on it and watch it. Perhaps the process skipped too quickly, but there was no need to say much. Good ideas and Yarrow Dehua's support for Poplar Fruit had already predicted the success of the minority language team. Their success at the moment might not necessarily shock the English team, but who knew how they would develop in the future? In the evening, at the resort's largest banquet hall, Cinder Translation hosted a cocktail party for all the employees who came to participate in the competition. Poplar Fruit followed Yarrow Dehua to get to know the executives of Cinder Translation before returning to the area where the minority language team was located. Poplar Fruit then realized that the cocktail party had been turned into a celebration party by these people. As soon as Poplar Fruit returned, all kinds of toasts were thrown at him. Poplar Fruit repeatedly refused not to drink. In the end, under Laro Jichong's lead, everyone kicked up a fuss and doused Director Yang, who had left the deepest impression on them, with wine. They almost lifted him up and threw him a few times. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He found a place to change into clean clothes, but the smell of alcohol still lingered on his body. His hair was also stuck in knots by the bubbles of champagne. Everyone had a good time and was a little sad. After all, they had to go their separate ways tomorrow. However, fortunately, they were in the same company. There would still be opportunities to meet in the future. Poplar Fruit had sneaked out. When he left, he packed a big box of crystal prawn dumplings, a whole salt-baked chicken, and a bowl of Jarb's Tares yam porridge, which was good for the stomach. Poplar Fruit felt a little guilty for leaving Kiki with Fong Beibei for so long yesterday, so he decided to bring some delicious food for Fong Beibei. The car drove steadily, and the porridge did not spill at all. Poplar Fruit returned to the apartment and opened the door of his house. He came back. He hadn't told Fong Beibei yet. He wanted to give them a surprise. After opening the door, the room was unexpectedly quiet. Except for Goldie, who was wagging its tail to greet him, Poplar Fruit did not see anyone else. "Where is she?" Poplar Fruit doubtfully said to himself. He put the things on the table and then sat on the chair to change his shoes. "You're back." Hearing the sound, Fong Beibei pushed open the bedroom door and came out. She was wearing a home shirt and shorts. They were very loose, and there seemed to be nothing more inside. On the proud mountain range, Poplar Fruit seemed to be able to see two protrusions. "You're inside." Poplar Fruit hurriedly looked away. He did not dare to look again and asked. "Yes, lower your voice. Kiki is asleep. I was just doing my homework inside." Fong Beibei stretched and said. Poplar Fruit did not dare to look at Fong Beibei's chest, but the white belly exposed by the lazy waist still attracted Poplar Fruit's eyes. It was too flat, without a bit of fat. It seemed to be very elastic. He really wanted to touch it. "What are you looking at?" Fong Beibei stared at Poplar Fruit and straightened her clothes. Poplar Fruit quickly opened the bag of delicious food that he brought back, and said to Fong Beibei, "Look, I brought back delicious food for you." Fong Beibei just wanted to come over and take a look. Suddenly, she took 2 steps back, waved her hand in front of her nose in disgust, and said, "Did you drink?" Poplar Fruit stared blankly, and said with a wry smile, "When did I drink?" "Then you reek of alcohol. It stinks to death." Fong Beibei said in disbelief. "These were all poured on my body by others. Those guys are too crazy. I don't drink, so they poured it on my hair." Poplar Fruit spread out his hands and said helplessly, "Then hurry up and take a shower. It stinks to death." Fong Beibei pinched her nose and said in a muffled voice, "Okay, then hurry up and eat. Don't wait for it to get cold." Poplar Fruit ran to the closet and said before jumping into the bathroom. After taking a shower, Poplar Fruit came out and saw Fong Beibei lifting one leg on the chair and eating without a care for her image. He smiled and asked, "How is it? Is it delicious?" "It's delicious." Fong Beibei said with her mouth full, "Sit here." After saying that, she moved her leg a little bit, leaving some space for Poplar Fruit on the chair. "Come, you eat too." Fong Beibei directly tore a drumstick with her greasy hands and handed it to Poplar Fruit and said, "No need, I already ate at the hotel." Poplar Fruit sat down, waved his hand and said with a smile, "I've eaten too. It's a midnight snack." Fong Beibei handed the drumstick in front of Poplar Fruit and said, "If you don't eat with me, how can I finish so much food? Besides, I don't want to become a big fatty." She pouted her mouth, twisted her body, and said with a fat tone, "Hurry up and eat. If you eat one more drumstick, I can lose 10 pounds. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. Because the drumstick was torn a little too big, Poplar Fruit took the drumstick with both hands and imitated Fong Beibei to eat it without caring about his image. "This crystal prawn dumpling is delicious." Fong Beibei used a bamboo stick to pick up a crystal prawn dumpling and threw it into her mouth, happily said, fragrant and tender, "Do you want to eat?" Fong Beibei picked up another one and asked Poplar Fruit. En. Poplar Fruit vaguely nodded, opened his mouth and said, "Aya, uncle, you're really a young master's life. I have to feed you." Fong Beibei said to Poplar Fruit while using a bamboo stick to pass the crystal prawn dumpling in front of Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit opened his mouth and took a bite. He only felt that the prawn meat was smooth and tender, the juice overflowed, and the sweetness reached his heart. "If it's porridge," Fong Beibei protected the bowl of porridge and said, "I won't let you eat it." Recently, The Legend of the Imperial Harem, you all know which show Xiao Han is referring to, was popular on all major TV stations. Fong Beibei was also following it, and even when she spoke mischievously, there was a hint of an imperial harem. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei, whose mouth was red and glossy, and suddenly laughed, laughing happily and happily. Seeing that everyone's recommendation votes are getting fewer and fewer, and the monthly votes are almost non-existent, Xiao Han is very depressed. In fact, Xiao Han also knows that there are a lot of traps in the beginning, but starting from 2 weeks ago, a lot of plots have begun to surface. Xiao Han will also work hard to write a more exciting story. I hope that everyone will not be stingy with their vote. Chapter 273. Yaoshuo brought his video team and flew to Yangcheng. Yang Guo didn't discuss the cooperation with Yaoshuo with the company. First of all, he wasn't interested in business negotiations. Second of all, he had more important things that he needed to attend to. Poplar Fruit took a taxi. The Land Rover was too big of a target and would be easily spotted by Che and Juan. Therefore, he left the car at the school. After getting out of the car, Poplar Fruit carefully observed his surroundings. Che and Juan lived in an urban village in the potato district. The houses were disorderly and the streets were messy. There were also a few factories in the area. From time to time, large trucks would blare their horns as they slowly drove through the crowded roads. Poplar Fruit wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of village. When he was just admitted to university, Poplar Fruit took advantage of the 3-month holiday to come to Yangcheng for a summer job. He stayed with an acquaintance who went out to work in the village. His residence was also in a village in the city. The village in the city was a mix of crooks and honest folk. If you looked up, you might see a bare-chested farmer uncle. If you looked down, you might see a young man in a suit pushing open the door. The most important thing was that the environment here was too complicated. If you didn't stay here for a few years, you might get lost. Seeing this environment, Poplar Fruit was a bit worried. Could he catch the slippery Che and Juan here? He didn't have any confidence at all. In order not to alert the enemy, Poplar Fruit decided to wait. He followed the address Song Juan gave him and found Che and Juan's house number. He hid in a nearby alley. This alley was a dead end. It was filled with junk and probably no one walked around. The dilapidated buildings on the 4 sides formed an encirclement, blocking the direct sunlight. Even if it was broad daylight, it was still dark. It was really hidden. The old ladies and uncles walking around didn't notice Poplar Fruit hiding in the dark corner. No one saw that in the darkness, there was a pair of shining eyes that were watching the movements outside. This wait lasted for more than 2 to 3 hours. If it were anyone else, they would have been impatient by now. However, Poplar Fruit was different. He was actually doing 2 things at once. He was squatting there and translating in his mind at the same time. During this long wait, Poplar Fruit actually translated more than 10 pages of Teenage Pie's fantasy drifting. They are here. Poplar Fruit's spirits were lifted. Poplar Fruit saw a man wearing a cap walking towards Che and Juan's apartment. Even though he couldn't see the man's face, from the man's figure and the way he walked, Poplar Fruit was sure that this was the man who had secretly taken pictures of him at the teacher's dormitory. Poplar Fruit stood up and moved his numb legs. He did not act rashly. Instead, he patiently waited for the most suitable opportunity. He had already waited for 3 hours. Why would he care about a few minutes? Cheon-juan was probably in a good mood after playing outside for a night. He whistled and jogged up the bluestone steps. On the steps, a mischievous child dropped a stone. Cheon-juan saw it and stopped abruptly. He stretched out his left foot and gently stepped on the stone. The stone bounced up like a football. It was not over yet. Cheon-juan's legs kicked quickly. It was so fast that only after images were left. The stone seemed to have a life of its own. It moved back and forth between his legs very docilely. It stayed in the air and did not fall. As expected of a martial artist who practiced leg techniques, Poplar Fruit sighed in his heart. With this skill of playing with stones, it was more than enough for him to play football in a professional team. Of all the things he could do, why did he become a private detective that was not allowed by domestic law? Although playing football in China did not necessarily have a bright future, it was better than secretly taking photos of others like the paparazzi and destroying other people's lives. Finally, Cheon-juan had enough. He gently pushed the stone with the heel of his right leg. It flew out and fell into the smelly ditch. He did not even turn his head, as if he had already determined where the stone would land. Cheon-juan walked to the door. He did not immediately take out the key to open the door. Instead, he pulled up his sleeves and gently wiped the dust on the door plate. He even blew a breath of hot air. He looked overly meticulous. Poplar Fruit was a little puzzled. Was it not just a door plate? What was there to wipe? After wiping the door plate, Cheon-juan took out the key from his coat pocket and prepared to open the door. Now's the time, Poplar Fruit thought to himself. He finally moved. However, he did not move very quickly. Instead, he held his breath and slowly crept closer to Cheon-juan. He wanted to pounce on Cheon-juan and catch him before he opened the large iron door on the first floor and the wooden door on the second floor was fully opened. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was bony. Things could not always go according to one's idea. Human factors determined that the trajectory was unpredictable. As a matter of fact, the situation suddenly changed. Cheon-juan did not know if it was maintained too well, but the large iron door of his house was shiny. Although Poplar Fruit's movements were small, his figure was already reflected on the large iron door. Cheon-juan immediately noticed a shadow moving. His key was still inserted into the iron door lock when he discovered Poplar Fruit's movements. Cheon-juan did not suspect anything. He just frowned and turned around to see which neighbor passed by and wanted to say hello. As soon as he turned around, he happened to meet Poplar Fruit's eyes. Cheon-juan was stunned. He saw Poplar Fruit's appearance and did not expect Poplar Fruit to appear in front of his door. Poplar Fruit was also stunned. He did not know how Cheon-juan suddenly discovered him. His plan was suddenly disrupted. Cheon-juan's face suddenly changed. He did not care about continuing to open the door. He forcefully pulled out the key and ran. Poplar Fruit reacted the moment Cheon-juan pulled out the key. He quickly changed his mode and no longer tiptoed. Instead, he took large strides and pounced on Cheon-juan. Cheon-juan would not let Poplar Fruit catch him so easily. Although the space in front of the door was a little narrow, he still nimbly dodged. Then, he pressed the upper edge of the stone railing on the left and used his strength to flip over. When Poplar Fruit ran to the stone railing, Cheon-juan had already returned to the alley. He was like a frightened rabbit, his arms flailing as he ran quickly. "Don't run," Poplar Fruit shouted. After shouting, he felt that he was a little funny. Wasn't this like the police chasing the criminals in the movies? What was the use of shouting "don't run"? Would the criminals just stand there stupidly and wait for you to catch them? Although his mind was still spinning with these random thoughts, Poplar Fruit did not stop. He jumped down from the bluestone steps and chased after Cheon-juan. Seeing that everyone's recommendation votes are getting fewer and fewer, and that there are almost no monthly votes, Xiao Han has been very depressed. In fact, there were a lot of holes in the beginning. Xiao Han also knows that, but since 2 weeks ago, a lot of the plot has begun to surface. Xiao Han will also work hard to write a more exciting story. I hope that everyone will not be stingy with their votes. Chapter 274. Poplar fruit had been brooding over Cheonjuan's escape the last time. It wasn't because of his pride, but because it was related to the comparison between the two martial arts. Although Tai Chi was a type of martial arts, its body movement was also one of the best among the three major martial arts. Think about it, if a Tai Chi martial artist's body movement wasn't agile enough, he would have been caught and beaten up by others. How would he have the chance to go around in circles and play with his opponent? Although the 8 meteor steps kick was indeed unique, Poplar Fruit didn't feel that his body movement was much worse than the 8 meteor steps kick. As for why he lost him the last time, it could only be said that Poplar Fruit was looking for trouble. He was wearing a pair of flip-flops that couldn't run, so how could he catch up? Not to mention Cheonjuan's body movement, even a cat or a dog wouldn't be able to catch up. This time, Poplar Fruit wore a pair of low-top sneakers, so he ran very fast. Although he started slower than Cheonjuan, he didn't get further and further away from Cheonjuan. "Stop!" Poplar Fruit shouted as he chased. As Cheonjuan ran, he looked back and realized that the speed he was so proud of didn't work. Biting his lower lip, Cheonjuan rolled his eyes and leaped into the narrow alley beside him. Since he couldn't run faster than Poplar Fruit, he would use the terrain to get rid of Poplar Fruit. Cheonjuan knew that the environment of this village was too complicated. He grew up here, so he was familiar with every blade of grass and tree here. He didn't believe that an outsider like Poplar Fruit could outrun him here. Poplar Fruit didn't think too much. He braked at the entrance of the alley, stepped back, and chased into the narrow alley. As soon as he entered, he saw Cheonjuan kicking back and forth between two walls that were close to each other. His whole body was lifted into the air, and he somersaulted over it. When he reached the bottom of the wall, Poplar Fruit saw Cheonjuan flipping over the wall. With his eyes wide open, Poplar Fruit looked at the two walls. He didn't think he could be like Cheonjuan, who had the unique skill of leaping onto roofs and vaulting over walls. If he kept jumping back and forth like this, he would definitely fall. Gritting his teeth, Poplar Fruit took a deep breath and jumped nearly 2 meters into the air. When his body reached the highest height, the Poplar Fruit placed his hands on the wall and hooked onto it. Fortunately, there was no anti-theft device for glass shards. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit's hand would be in trouble. Poplar Fruit used all his strength to climb up the wall. When he looked up, Cheonjuan had already run to the corner of another street. He turned right and disappeared. Poplar Fruit quickly flipped over, but when he jumped down, he groaned. "Fuck!" Poplar Fruit gloomily shouted. He didn't notice that there was a smelly ditch below. Fortunately, he didn't sprain his ankle. Poplar Fruit didn't care about the stains on his body, and hurriedly chased after Cheonjuan. Under the stimulation of anger, Poplar Fruit's internal energy began to circulate. The rhythm of his running became faster and faster, and his speed increased by a lot. "What the fuck?" Cheonjuan spat to the side and gloomily shouted in his heart. He thought that the wall had stopped Poplar Fruit, so after running for a distance, he looked back and saw Poplar Fruit popping out from the corner again. "Don't run!" Poplar Fruit shouted loudly. Although there were black spots on his clothes, he didn't care about them anymore. "You're really haunting me." Cheonjuan braced himself and continued to run. Did he take drugs? So fast. After running for a while, Cheonjuan looked back and almost jumped up. The distance was more than 50 meters, but after running for a minute, there were only 30 meters left. If this continued, he would be caught by Poplar Fruit sooner or later. Therefore, Cheonjuan used the surrounding environment again. Relying on his familiarity with the surroundings, he jumped over walls, went up houses, and passed through people's houses. Like a gust of wind, he attracted screams from the people in the village. Poplar Fruit's speed was fast, but Cheonjuan's running left and right made Poplar Fruit suffer. Not only did he not close the distance between them, but he was also embarrassed. Once, Poplar Fruit jumped over a fence with Cheonjuan. With a bang, Poplar Fruit stepped on a pile of dog poop, but Cheonjuan was completely fine. It wasn't over yet. Cheonjuan didn't know if he knew the dog, but when he ran over, the dog wagged its tail and welcomed him. Poplar Fruit was sadly targeted by the dog. As soon as he ran over, the dog barked and rushed at him. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was skilled and brave. Not only did he not run away, but he also pounced on the evil dog. At that moment, he switched to the intent mode of Shingi boxing, and his whole body emitted a fierce tiger's aura. Perhaps it was because he had seen blood before, but his fierce strength scared the evil dog so much that it pissed its pants and ran away with its tail between its legs. Poplar Fruit had a lot of injuries on his body. After running fast, he often bumped into walls and corners, and his body couldn't control the excessive force of inertia. After chasing for about 10 minutes, Poplar Fruit's clothes had a few holes, and his hands and feet had different degrees of abrasions. The more he couldn't catch up, the angrier Poplar Fruit became. He really wanted to catch this loach-like guy today. At this time, Poplar Fruit used his memory of the map of this place to construct a 3D topographic map. Although many details were missing, it was still very useful. I can't let him run anymore. Poplar Fruit suddenly opened his eyes wide and thought to himself. Yes, not far ahead was the largest farmer's market in the potato district. Not only were there cars coming and going, but there were also crowds of people and all kinds of shops. If Cheon-juan wanted to blend in, he could easily hide there. Looking for a needle in a haystack, Poplar Fruit wouldn't be able to find him. That's right, Cheon-juan was thinking the same thing. He didn't look back and ran towards the road to the farmer's market. As long as he clenched his teeth and held on for a few more minutes, he would be able to shake off the guy behind him. What should I do? What should I do? Poplar Fruit shouted in his heart. His brain was spinning fast. This path might work. Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up. He had found a shortcut in the topographic map in his mind. Perhaps he could use this shortcut to intercept Cheon-juan running in front of him. Poplar Fruit thought he had found a shortcut that Cheon-juan couldn't find, but he didn't think that Cheon-juan was so familiar with this place. If there really was a shortcut, why didn't he take it? Yang-gu didn't continue to stare at Cheon-juan's back. He turned to the shortcut he had thought of. After running a few steps, he was immediately dumbfounded. What's going on? Shouldn't this be a direct path? Why is there an extra row of short houses? This doesn't make sense. A book friend asked if the novel would explode. Those who have followed this book should know that Xiao Han rarely explodes with new chapters. At least, this book has very few chapters. In the future, let's read it again. Xiao Han is also working hard. Since the change from 2 chapters to 3 chapters, Xiao Han has been trying his best to maintain a stable update rate. He has never stopped updating, right? Please continue to support Xiao Han tilde. Chapter 275. The Chengdu map is a scam. Poplar Fruit looked at the row of short bungalows that suddenly appeared in front of him like magic and almost vomited blood. This path is blocked by bungalows. How can the Chengdu map tell me that there is a path here? Illegal building. That's right, this was indeed an illegal building. The few families next to it had rented out their downstairs for food stalls to do business. The alley behind them was originally narrow, and cars couldn't even pass through it. They had righteously expanded it and built a small wooden shed that became an extension of their house. The Bureau of Industry and Commerce, the City Regulation Bureau, and even the City Management Bureau all tried to intervene, but it was all to no avail. The relevant departments were too lazy to deal with this remote and dirty area. Anyway, the city inspection will not come to this place, so they just let it be. In the end, they replaced the wooden shed with a concrete hut and directly occupied this place. If this drags on, Cheon-juan will run away. Poplar Fruit became anxious. But he could not run back the way he came. He had already been delayed for a while. If he ran back the way he came, he would definitely not be able to catch up. Gritting his teeth, Poplar Fruit decided to fight. Hey, what are you doing? A sharp-eyed shop assistant called out, and Yang-gu climbed up the wall. Luckily, he had a lot of strength in his limbs, so he could only rely on his fingertips to climb up the wall. Other people might not be so lucky. The shop assistant who shouted was dumbstruck as he watched Yang-gu climb up the short bungalow in a few steps and then disappear without a trace. What are you doing? The boss hurriedly ran out and scolded, "Did I invite you here to look at the sky at a 45-degree angle? Stop pretending to be depressed." "No, boss, there was an alien just now," the waiter said incoherently. "Not an alien, but a human as scary as an alien." "I don't care if it is an alien or not. Go back and bring me the food. The customers are getting impatient. Do you want me to work for you?" The boss scolded and raised his foot to kick him. Poplar Fruit climbed to the top of the low-rise bungalow, gritted his teeth, and ran forward. Although these bungalows were built with cement bricks, the workmanship of these illegal buildings was not strong enough. In some places, one could even squeeze a foot through the gaps. Poplar Fruit ran in fear, afraid that he would accidentally step on someone's roof. However, worrying was of no use. Poplar Fruit desperately ran forward. One house, two houses, they were not connected. He could only jump over them. 3 houses, 4 houses, 5 houses. Poplar Fruit finally saw the edge of the corner. He could even hear the sound of Che and Juan gasping for breath. Even though Che and Juan was also a martial artist, running at full speed for more than 10 to 20 minutes was a bit too much for him. Only Poplar Fruit, with his internal energy as his shield, was able to run for so long without blushing. "Caught you." Poplar Fruit was overjoyed. He did not have time to look around, and before he ran to the edge of the bungalow, he jumped from a height of 3 meters. In the air, he saw Che and Juan running past. Poplar Fruit only had time to adjust his posture, and then stretched out one hand to grab Che and Juan's arm. Before he could react, Poplar Fruit pulled him and rolled to the ground. Che and Juan would never have thought that Poplar Fruit, who was just chasing after him, would suddenly become a flying man. Che and Juan was pulled to the ground by a huge force. As he rolled, he looked at the farmer's market in front of him unwillingly. Only 500 meters left. Damn it, only 500 meters left and he could run into the farmer's market and then escape. He did not believe that as long as he did not appear, Poplar Fruit would keep waiting in front of his house. 1 day, 2 days was not enough, but what about a week, 2 weeks, or even a few months? Poplar Fruit would definitely not waste time with him, unless Poplar Fruit did not want his life anymore. "Caught you." Poplar Fruit gently gasped for breath as he climbed up from the ground, and then sat on Che and Juan's body. Che and Juan at this time was gasping for breath, his chest was heaving up and down, and he could not speak at all. "You run. You run." Poplar Fruit said this, his face was somewhat ferocious, faintly revealing a trace of hostility. Poplar Fruit did not say enough. He raised his fist, and his fingers were clenched until they turned blue and white, as if he wanted to give Che and Juan a hard punch. The process of chasing Che and Juan just now was too humiliating. There was the smelly ditch, and then there was the dog poop. No matter how good a person's mood was, they would have flipped out. Poplar Fruit had seen a lot of blood during this period of time. He had killed a few people, and there was a devil in his mind. After catching Che and Juan, the anger in her stomach surged up. She raised her fist. Yang really wanted to kill Che and Juan with one punch. Therefore, Poplar Fruit used all his strength in this punch. Think about it, at the bank, Poplar Fruit's full-strength punch could break stone. Could a person's head be harder than the bank's marble floor? If it was a solid hit, it would definitely end with death or disability. Seeing Poplar Fruit's fist, Che and Juan did not even have time to beg for mercy. His eyes were wide open, and his pupils shrunk to the size of a needle. He watched as Poplar Fruit's fist smashed down. Bang! A brick next to Che and Juan was smashed into pieces by Poplar Fruit's fist. Yes, Poplar Fruit stopped. He did not hit Che and Juan's head in the end. At the last moment, his internal strength was still circulating naturally. A cool feeling made Poplar Fruit's mind clear, so he changed the direction of his fist, and in the end, only hit the brick. Huff, huff. Che and Juan gasped for breath. This time, he was scared. When Poplar Fruit's fist fell, he could feel the arrival of the Grim Reaper. The smashed brick told him that this punch hit, and he was really dead. Although he did not know why Poplar Fruit did not hit him, when he saw Poplar Fruit straighten his body and pull back his fist with a little bit of blood, Cheonjuan was so scared that he raised his arms and shouted in a trembling voice, "Don't hit me, don't hit me." With his arms in front of his face, Cheonjuan closed his eyes. He did not dare to look at Poplar Fruit, who was like a demon king just now. Poplar Fruit pulled Cheonjuan's arms away with both hands. Cheonjuan struggled with all his might, and his voice was a little bit sobbing, "Don't hit me, spare me, I was wrong, I know I was wrong, okay?" Poplar Fruit saw tears oozing out of this big man's closed eyes. He could not help but be stunned. Isn't this too cowardly? He stopped what he was doing and scanned the surroundings. Poplar Fruit let out a sigh of relief. Luckily, there was no one passing by. Otherwise, if they saw Poplar Fruit sitting on Cheonjuan's body, holding his hands, and Cheonjuan crying and crying like a wronged little wife, who knows what kind of misunderstanding people would have. "You don't want my money?" Cheonjuan rolled his eyes and asked, "Really? I cooked it." Poplar Fruit said speechlessly. He stood up and said, "I don't want your money, I just want to know, who sent you to mess up my life? You should have said so earlier. Why did you make it so complicated, running for half a day? I'm exhausted." Cheonjuan stood up, patted the dust, and said, "If you didn't run, would I have chased you?" Poplar Fruit stared at him and said, "So you want to tell me?" "No, I'm a professional detective who loves his job. How can I disclose the customer's information?" Cheonjuan was like an old tortoise, refusing to let go. "You motherfucker!" Poplar Fruit flew into a rage, stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar and pressed him against the wall, angrily looked at him and said, "Are you playing with me? Do you really want me to beat you? You also saw what happened to that brick. Hero, please calm down, please calm down." Cheonjuan also realized that he played a little too much. He cupped his hands, smiled and said with a cheap look, "So, are you going to say it or not?" Poplar Fruit asked impatiently. "I can't say it directly, I love what I do, I have to abide by the rules." Cheonjuan saw that Poplar Fruit's fist was raised again. He quickly said, "But I can give you a hint, a hint." Poplar Fruit paused, slowly put down his fist, frowned and said, "What hint?" "Think about it, the guy who hired me sent the photos to Duan Shuetching. What was he thinking?" Cheonjuan saw that Poplar Fruit was thinking. He did not keep him in suspense, and directly answered, "He must have thought that if Duan Shuetching saw these photos, she would give up on you and say goodbye to you." Poplar Fruit was too lazy to correct his misunderstanding of his relationship with Duan Shuetching, and asked, "And then?" "Then, he could take advantage of the situation." Cheonjuan said, "Think about it, if Duan Shuetching broke up with you, who would be the biggest beneficiary?" "I can't think of it." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "She has so many suitors, how can I count them all?" "Then, who do you think was the one who was obstructed by you when he was pursuing Duan Shuetching, and then held a grudge against you, and was willing to spend a lot of money to let me check your background? This person was thinking that after you were dumped by Duan Shuetching, he could take advantage of the situation." Cheonjuan almost revealed his own income, and quickly changed his words. Liang Zhenglin. After listening to Cheonjuan's big hint, Poplar Fruit's mind was only left with a slick face. He gritted his teeth and shouted word by word. "Well, this is your own speculation. I didn't reveal any client's information." Cheonjuan raised his hands and laughed. "Then it all makes sense." Poplar Fruit put Cheonjuan down, and muttered to himself in a low voice. Yes, if Liang Zhenglin was the instigator, then all the misunderstandings could be explained. The biker gang that he met at the hot pot restaurant had nothing to do with Fu Lei, so how could he call someone over so quickly? Only Liang Zhenglin, because I stopped him from being close to Duan Shuetching, would hold a grudge against me, and then find the biker gang to teach me a lesson. The biker gang didn't work, and his first plan failed. He had once again humiliated him in front of his unit and ruined his plan to pursue Duan Shuetching. This had once again deepened the grudge between him and himself. That was why the secret photos had appeared. "Hey." Cheonjuan saw Poplar Fruit fall into self-destruction, and asked anxiously, "Our problem is solved, can I go now?" "Not yet." Poplar Fruit suddenly turned his head, looked at Cheonjuan, and said seriously, "As for Liang Zhenglin, I will naturally find him to settle the score, but now, I want to settle the score between us with you. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to smash the poor." Chapter 277. Hearing Poplar Fruit's words, Cheonjuan retracted his leg. He had learned his lesson and did not dare to escape. He had seen Poplar Fruit's skills and knew that he could not escape. If he was caught, he might be beaten again. "Big brother, I have already given you a hint, what else do you want? This matter is not my fault, I am just doing a part-time job. TSK, I have already done it. Do you want me to apologize to you again?" Cheonjuan said helplessly. "I don't want to talk about this." Poplar Fruit said with a frown, "That matter has its perpetrator and debt has its debtor. I will naturally look for Liang Zhenglin to settle it. As for you, I want to ask you clearly. You also practice martial arts. Why would you do such an immoral job like secretly taking pictures of others?" Although Poplar Fruit only practiced martial arts for a year, he also experienced the hardships of practicing martial arts. He knew that his situation was special. If other people wanted to practice martial arts, they would have to sweat more than him. Working hard to practice martial arts, but doing a job where he could not raise his head, was it worth it? Poplar Fruit wanted to ask Cheonjuan this question for a long time. Hee. Cheonjuan stood against the corner, looked up at the sky and smiled. "I will say something unpleasant. Brother Yang, don't be angry. You are the second generation of rich officials. How can you understand the hardships of the people at the bottom? For this little money, I will do it even if I have to sell my life." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Poplar Fruit said. "When did I become the second generation of rich officials? I don't want to talk about how luxurious the places you go. Your Land Rover is expensive enough, right? If you say you are not the second generation, I really don't believe it," Cheonjuan said with a gentle smile. "I am not what you think." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "I was born in the countryside. I might have been worse off than you. The Land Rover's money was earned by my own hand." "Are you serious? You can earn so much money. Are you an underground fighter?" Cheonjuan's eyes almost popped out as he asked. "Believe it or not, I earned money by learning English in university," Poplar Fruit said. "But I say, why do you always talk about money? Are you short of money? You can be considered as someone who owns a house. You can do whatever you want. I don't believe that with your cleverness, you can't make a decent living." "Sigh. Don't tell me I'm really short on money," Cheonjuan said with a wry smile. He felt uncomfortable and tired, so he took Poplar Fruit to sit on the grass by the road. He spread his legs, picked up a blade of grass with his right hand, and held it in his mouth. He continued, "You might not believe me, but the problem of my lack of money really does appear in my house." He could feel that Poplar Fruit had no malice towards him, and when Poplar Fruit mentioned this matter, it was as if he had opened his chatterbox. He began to talk to Poplar Fruit. "The house you just saw was left behind by my grandfather's generation. My grandfather's father, the Chezian you mentioned, did come back alive from the battlefield, but he broke a leg and left in less than a year," Cheonjuan said. "My grandfather was still young at the time. At the age of 14, he carried the entire sect." "Of course," Cheonjuan said with a wry smile. "After my grandfather came back, his health was not good. When he taught my grandfather kung fu, it was intermittent. In the end, my grandfather only learned a body skill, and the rest of the leg skills were not fully learned. There were kung fu books, but without a master to teach him, he could only fumble around by himself. He couldn't make a name for himself." Cheonjuan shook his head and said, "So he decided to let the sect hide and keep a low profile. He was worried that his former enemies would come to find him, so he came to this place." "You also saw it," Cheonjuan said. "My house is where my family lived for 3 generations, and it is also the guarantee that the sect will continue to exist. Unfortunately, it is going to be demolished." "Demolished?" Poplar Fruit asked, puzzled. There was news 2 years ago that the village in the city was going to be renovated, and the roads were widened. My house should be in the location where it will be demolished. Although it has been so long since the construction started, from time to time, some gangsters came to force the old people to sign the contract. Cheon-juan said with a wry smile, I don't have the money to buy a new house. I can't wait for the demolition team to come and tear down the house, and then abandon my ancestors and the ancestral tablets of the sect, right? Poplar Fruit was silent. So money. It's really a penny stumped a hero. If I don't take the risk, how can I earn enough money to buy a new house? Cheon-juan asked. Then do you have enough now? Poplar Fruit asked. It's enough, Cheon-juan said with a smile, it's all thanks to you. Otherwise, if I always went to take photos of uncles and aunties, I don't know how long it would take. Poplar Fruit didn't argue with him, and asked, then what are your plans for the future? What else can I plan? Cheon-juan said with a wry smile, first, I'll buy a new house for my ancestors, and then I'll think about what to do. But if you want to find trouble with Liang Zhenglin, I have to hide for a few months, afraid that he will find trouble with me. As for what to do in the future, Cheon-juan fell into deep thought. I haven't thought about it yet. When I was young, I didn't study well. Other than being a security guard, there was no other choice. It seems that, after thinking about it, private detective is the most suitable for me. Poplar Fruit pushed him and said, as a man, can't you be a bit more promising? Then what can I do? Cheon-juan said with grievance, can you give me an idea? Poplar Fruit awkwardly scratched his head. How could he have an idea? After thinking carefully, Poplar Fruit said, weren't you good at running? There are a lot of parkour videos at night, and those people are not as good as you. You mean you want me to show parkour videos? Cheon-juan asked, that can't earn money. That's not what I mean. I think if you act in a movie, it might be very good. Your kung fu is enough to deal with a lot of scenes. Poplar Fruit thought about the movies he watched and said, act as someone who fights with others, or a tough guy. You still say that. I also want to, but how can there be so many good things? Cheon-juan rolled his eyes and said, I don't have any experience, and I have never learned how to act, who would use me? Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of a person called Shou Xiaoxing. He is not a well-known director, maybe he would be willing to use a newcomer. However, Poplar Fruit was not sure. He did not know if Shou Xiaoxing would use Cheon-juan. He also did not know if Cheon-juan could fit the video of Shou Xiaoxing. You should give me a way to contact you. Poplar Fruit hesitated and said, I will see if my friend can help. For Cheon-juan, Poplar Fruit was a bit too kind. A small person who offended him, not only did he not take revenge, but he also wanted to help him. In fact, it was very rare to see a person who practiced martial arts so well in this society. This was just Poplar Fruit's appreciation for martial arts. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 278. Back at school, Poplar Fruit went to pick up Kiki. What's wrong with you? You keep throwing Kiki to me. Is Kiki your daughter or my daughter? Fong Beibei could not help but blame him and said, why are you so busy every day? You've earned enough money, why do you still have to work so hard to earn this little bit of money? I'm sorry. Poplar Fruit could only say with a smile. Today, when he went to find Cheon-juan, he told Fong Beibei that he was going to a meeting. He did not want to tell Fong Beibei about this matter, so he rarely lied. Moreover, when he came back, he changed his clothes in the car and covered his hand, fearing that Fong Beibei would see the wound. This kind of meeting only comes a few times a year. Usually, I don't need to be busy, so don't worry. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, I'll pick up Kiki and gold. See you next time. Let's go. Fong Beibei said to Poplar Fruit, I have to go back to school later. See you, Beibei. Kiki politely waved to Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei gave her a flying kiss, and Kiki also learned to do the same. Returning to her father's embrace, Kiki was very excited and chattered non-stop. Poplar Fruit did not understand what his daughter was saying, because Kiki's expression was not very coherent, and there were many words that Kiki did not understand, so it was a bit messy, and all kinds of tone words were mixed in. Poplar Fruit smiled and kissed his daughter's forehead, tied her to the baby safety seat in the front passenger seat, and then returned to his seat at ease. As for Gold, of course, it was in the third row of the trunk. "What song do you want to listen to?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. However, he was just asking casually. Before Kiki could figure out his question, Poplar Fruit clicked on a children's song that Kiki liked to listen to. Then, he slowly started the car. La la, la la, la la. Kiki listened to the song and danced with joy, singing along. Poplar Fruit listened to his daughter's childish voice and laughed all the way. He was in a good mood. However, when he got home, Poplar Fruit's mood worsened again. He carried Kiki to Duan Shueching's door. He knocked on the door many times, but Duan Shueching didn't open the door. What happened? Poplar Fruit took out his phone and looked at the time. He said to himself, "It's already 8 o'clock. Why isn't she home?" At home, at home. Kiki imitated her father's words and scratched her father's hair. She wanted to make her father's hair into a chicken's nest. "Don't make trouble," Poplar Fruit said softly. He went upstairs and knocked on Song Jiwen's door. He asked, "Where's Duan Shueching? Why isn't she home?" "I was just about to tell you," Song Jiwen said, wearing only a pair of underpants. "Don't talk about it. Hurry up and put on your clothes." Poplar Fruit covered Kiki's eyes and said to Song Jiwen helplessly, "Didn't I tell you not to dress so casually at home?" "Oh, after having a daughter, you started talking about me? Who used to be naked at home when there was no one else?" Song Jiwen curled his lips. This was something that Poplar Fruit said himself. Although he was complaining, he still put on his clothes. Duan Shueching moved back to where she used to live. Song Jiwen said, "This morning, she asked for leave to move. I wanted to talk to you about this later." "Why did she move back?" "She's living well." Poplar Fruit frowned and asked. "She came a few times and didn't see you come back." She was disheartened. Of course, she had to move. "Don't tell me you'll change your mind," Song Jiwen said. "I didn't have any bad feelings for her, okay?" Poplar Fruit said, "Her previous place wasn't as good as here. Why did she have to move back?" "Hey, I don't want to talk about your relationship. You can deal with it yourself." Song Jiwen laughed and said, "I'm going back to play games." Since Kitten left, Song Jiwen's relationship had been at a low point. Poplar Fruit didn't see him go out to hook up with women. Instead, he devoted himself to the game. "You might as well go to the bubble bar." Poplar Fruit couldn't help but say to him, "You come back from work all day to play games. Look at you, how pale is your face? I can't be corrupt. I have to save money to marry a wife." Song Jiwen shouted and ran to the bedroom. Poplar Fruit shook his head speechlessly. He closed the door and went back to his house. Kiki and Goldie stayed in her playground to play, while Poplar Fruit took out his phone and stood in the small space in the kitchen to call Duan Shueching. After thinking for a while, Duan Shueching picked up the phone. After a moment of silence, she said coldly, "Hello. You moved back?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Yeah," Duan Shueching replied. One word, even just a nasal sound, couldn't be more concise. "Why did you move back?" "It's good here," Poplar Fruit asked. "I don't want to live here." Duan Shueching paused for a moment and said, "If it's because of me, don't torture yourself like this." Poplar Fruit couldn't help but persuade, "We've always been good friends. Why can't we just chat and laugh like before?" Duan Shueching was silent. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to change the topic and said, "I called you because I found out about the photos." "Say it." Duan Shueching was silent for a moment and said, "I found the person who secretly took photos of me, and he confessed the mastermind behind the scenes." Poplar Fruit said, "Guess who?" Duan Shueching was silent. Poplar Fruit had to answer his own question, "It's that bastard Liang Zhanglin." Do you know that the group of bikers at our class reunion at Hot Pot City was also found by him? Oh. Duan Xueqing softly responded. This guy is really full of evil tricks. After I blocked him for you, he still didn't give up. You see, he secretly took photos of me to drive a wedge between us. He still hasn't given up on you. Poplar Fruit said, Do you understand now? Don't be sad. Is it useful? Duan Xueqing suddenly asked. Ah. Poplar Fruit was a little confused. Is there any meaning in saying who is the mastermind? Duan Xueqing asked again, whether I am sad or not, what does it have to do with Liang Zhenglin? You still don't understand, do you? It's not that I don't understand, but I really think that we are suitable to be good friends. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, Forget it, you don't need to say any more. Duan Xueqing hung up the phone. Hello, hello? Poplar Fruit shouted twice and was very depressed. What do you mean by is there any meaning? Poplar Fruit pinched his palms, and the abrasions on his palms were still faintly painful. He said to himself, I suffered so much today to ask this question, and you think it's meaningless? Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use votes to smash the poor. Chapter 279. After putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit glanced at Kiki, who seemed to be safe. He then picked up the key, pushed the door open, and walked out. This time, he didn't have to knock on the door. He used the key to open Song Jiwen's door and walked into his bedroom. Da. The roar of the machine gun was incessant. Song Jiwen was actually using the loudspeaker, and the sound was so loud. Yang Guo reached out and turned off the screen. Then, she turned Song Jiwen's head, who had been protesting, around. Liang Zhenglin. Do you remember that kid? Poplar Fruit said seriously. Of course. How could I not remember? Song Jiwen pointed at the computer and said helplessly, Can't you let me finish this game first? At this time, the sound of Song Jiwen's character dying came from the speaker. He covered his forehead and said, It's over. I'm going to be scolded by my teammates again. Do me a favor. I want to mess with Liang Zhenglin. Poplar Fruit ignored him and continued. Okay. Mess with him? How do you want to mess with him? Song Jiwen was interested and said, Beat him up. Or ask a few buddies to give him a badgers game. No need. Poplar Fruit said, Just ask someone to check his company's fire protection, sanitation, and so on. Wow. So ruthless. Song Jiwen shouted, What did he do to make you so angry? I've never seen you take the initiative to ask me to help you mess with someone. He was very quick-witted. Before Poplar Fruit could answer, he asked, He can't be the culprit, right? The one who asked Che Enjuan to secretly take pictures of your back? Yeah. Poplar Fruit nodded gently and asked, Can you check? No problem. It's more difficult to deal with his father's company. His company, hehe, how long has it been open? It's easy. Moreover, the buttocks of those who sell cosmetics are definitely not clean. I guarantee that I will be able to find out everything. Song Jiwen smiled and said. Then I'll leave this matter to you. Poplar Fruit asked. If he's heartless, I won't be righteous. Of course, you don't have to do anything illegal. Just investigate and give him some trouble. Song Jiwen patted his chest confidently and said, No problem, leave it to me. I guarantee you'll be able to vent your anger. Okay, keep playing. Poplar Fruit patted him on the shoulder and helped him turn on the computer screen again. Returning to his residence, Poplar Fruit laid on the couch and let out a long sigh. He felt sore all over and didn't even want to move a finger. Actually, it was not because he was tired from chasing after Che Enjuan. That little bit of running had not even reached Poplar Fruit's basic level of exercise. The reason why he was tired was mainly because his heart was tired. The problem was with Duan Xueqing. Ever since Poplar Fruit had seen Duan Xueqing at the welcoming ceremony, He felt that their temperaments were quite compatible. He could understand Duan Xueqing's coldness, and Duan Xueqing could also accept Poplar Fruit's occasional nagging. However, since then, Poplar Fruit had always regarded Duan Xueqing as a good friend. Of course, at that time, it was also partly because he already had a girlfriend. But now that he thought about it, he and Duan Xueqing were indeed only friends. Because of the past year, after breaking up with Lu Yunran, Poplar Fruit's chances of seeing Duan Xueqing increased instead of decreasing. However, Poplar Fruit himself still did not consider the possibility of a marriage with Duan Xueqing. Although he was a little slow when it came to relationships, he believed that his feelings were not wrong. Two people could be very good friends, but if it went further, it would not be right. Poplar Fruit was a little upset because Duan Xueqing's attitude was too resolute. He really did not want to lose a good friend because of this kind of thing, but did he have to force himself to agree? They could still be boyfriend and girlfriend, not good friends. Her heart was tired, and she was injured, so Yanghua didn't want to move anymore. He even emptied his mind and forced himself not to think about anything, giving himself time to breathe. After an unknown amount of time, Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that his fingers were wet, as if there was a thin leaf stirring it. Poplar Fruit turned his head and saw his precious daughter lying there with her butt raised. Of course, it was not her doing it. The one licking Poplar Fruit's fingers was the little golden retriever, Gold. Kiki was an accomplice. She was watching from the side with a smile, so happy that she could not find a side to look at. Well, you two little guys, instead of playing properly, you came to tease Daddy, right? Poplar Fruit laughed and suddenly sat up, saying with a serious face. Yes, it's Gold. Kiki betrayed Gold without hesitation. Woof woof. Gold barked softly, as if protesting that its teammates were not being helpful. What's wrong? You two little guys. Poplar Fruit felt that Gold wanted something. Otherwise, why would it lick his fingers for no reason, although these two little guys often caused trouble for him? Goldie jumped over the wall that Yanghua had built with boxes. Then, it used its front paws to grab the bowl that it had placed in the corner of the wall. Clang 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 clang. Hee hee, hee hee. Kiki heard the sound, sat up straight, pointed at Gold's direction and laughed foolishly at her father. Poplar Fruit saw and understood. He laughed and said, "Oh, I forgot to prepare dinner for you." When he came back today, he was so troubled by Duan Xueqing's matter that he forgot everything. Gold's dinner. Kiki had to drink milk, take a bath, and sleep later. If it wasn't for Gold, Poplar Fruit really forgot everything and just wanted to lie on the sofa for the night. Forget it, I don't want to think about it. What should be done is done. Life still needs to be lived. Poplar Fruit stood up, stretched, and said to himself. After washing the rice and washing the pot, Poplar Fruit began to cook. Although it was a little late, he hadn't eaten dinner yet. It was also a good opportunity to make some fresh dog food for Gold. It wasn't nutritious enough to eat dog food all the time. When he was bathing Kiki, Poplar Fruit realized that he hadn't taken care of Kiki for a few days. No wonder Fong Beibei complained to him. He was too much these days. He always left Kiki with her and did this and that outside alone. Poplar Fruit counted that it had been almost a week since he went to the Guo family martial arts school to look for trouble, if the weekend volunteer work was included. He wasn't very qualified to be a father. After bathing Kiki, Poplar Fruit sneaked in with Gold. When he went to bed tonight, Gold would definitely climb into his bed. He couldn't chase it away. He might as well wash it clean and sleep with him. That way, he would feel more comfortable. After washing it in the water, he used a hairdryer to dry its hair. Gold grimaced in pain from the hairdryer, but it especially enjoyed the feeling. Poplar Fruit turned off the hairdryer, and it even stretched out its forelimbs to touch Poplar Fruit's hand. Now, Gold's hair was gradually growing longer, and it was becoming more and more golden. It was no longer white and fluffy like when it was just brought home. Gold had also grown up. Poplar Fruit silently said in his heart. Yes, together with Kiki, it had grown up. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 280. The days passed one by one. Poplar Fruit's life returned to its usual peaceful state, but this peace was only temporary. Du and Xueqing continued to maintain a cold war with him. Their relationship seemed to have hit rock bottom. Although it was calm on the surface, it did not mean that there were hidden waves surging behind the scenes. Song Jiwen was having dinner with some of his friends who used to live in the same compound as him. They were discussing how to set up a big net for Liang Zhanglin and wait for an opportunity to cast it. As for Poplar Fruit himself, how could he have known that someone he could not afford to offend at this stage was eyeing him? A big net was slowly creeping towards him. But this was all in the future. Poplar Fruit had just received a call when another one came. Let's talk about the previous phone call. It was the good news from Cinder's translation team. After a few days of negotiations, Chen Shou had decided to accept Cinder's advertising investment of up to 800,000 yuan. In their experience in micromovies and short videos, this advertising investment was considered very large. Yao Dehua was also very generous. He made a promise that if Chen Shou could come up with a script that satisfied him or produce a video with good effects, then it would not be a problem to increase the advertising investment. Chen Shou brought people back to Beijing to continue planning the script. Poplar Fruit had nothing to do with the matters here for the time being, so he picked up the second call. The second call was from his mother. Poplar Fruit, what time is it now? You're still dawdling in Yangcheng. Are you coming back or not? His mother shouted over the phone. That's right. Kiki's first birthday was coming soon. Poplar Fruit looked at the time. It was already the 24th. In 4 days, no, in 3 days, it would be Kiki's birthday. He had been so busy that he had almost forgotten about it. Seeing Kiki playing beside him, Poplar Fruit chuckled. She probably did not realize that she was almost 1 year old. Kiki probably did not have the concept of birthdays, right? It was okay. After this, she would look forward to her birthday every day. What are you laughing at? What a heartless fellow. Xu Jinfeng heard Poplar Fruit's soft laughter over the phone before she got a response. She immediately got angry. No. Poplar Fruit quickly apologized and promised his mother that he would bring her cutest granddaughter home tomorrow. After putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit didn't dare to stay idle. He quickly began to pack his things. Going back to the countryside was different from going to the US. There were a lot of things that could not be bought in their hometown. So, Poplar Fruit had to pack up some of Kiki's necessities. However, this time, he didn't have to worry about the trouble of bringing a bunch of things home. Because in the back of the Land Rover, even if he brought the pots and pans home, they could all fit. Kiki, you can't bring so many toys. Why don't we pick a few that you like the most and bring them home? Poplar Fruit squatted down and discussed with Kiki. Kiki didn't know what he meant. She raised her head and saw her father stuffing a few of her favorite toys into the bag. She suddenly got anxious. Kiki thought that her father was going to pack up her toys and throw them away. Kiki hugged the Barbie doll tightly with one hand and used the other hand to support herself on the ground. She quickly crawled over to the bag and tried to take back the toys that Poplar Fruit had just put in. What are you doing? Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he picked her up. It was not easy to get the toys from her, but she wanted to take them back. Wouldn't that be a waste of all his efforts? Kiki pouted with a stubborn look on her face. She pointed at the toys in the bag and said seriously to her father. Yes, it's Kiki's. Poplar Fruit rubbed Kiki's little head and said with a smile. Then, Papa, did you take Kiki's? Kiki said with a little grievance. Poplar Fruit finally understood. It turned out that Kiki still didn't know what was going on. She thought that if he took it away, he wouldn't give it back to her. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "Aren't we going back to our hometown tomorrow? To see Grandpa and Grandma." Grandpa. Kiki tilted her head and thought for a while. Only then did she remember Yang Tai's appearance behind this title in her fragmented memory. Then she thought of the big yellow dog, Ah Fu, who left a deeper impression on her. "Fu Fu?" Kiki asked doubtfully. "Yes, when we go back to our hometown, we can still see Ah Fu." Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "So today, Dad is going to pack up your things. When the time comes, we'll go back to our hometown together." Kiki still couldn't understand what going back to her hometown had to do with her toys. She blinked her big watery eyes and looked at her father. "Tomorrow, when we get home tomorrow, Dad will give it back to you, okay?" Poplar Fruit could only explain like this. At this moment, Kiki finally understood. She thought for a while, giving her father a day off was not a big deal, so she nodded and said, "Okay." Poplar Fruit wiped his sweat. It was really difficult to explain things to his daughter. But at this time, Kiki suddenly stretched out her free right hand and waved it in front of her father's eyes. "What is this?" Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki's right hand with a puzzled look and asked. "Pinky promise," Kiki said seriously. Poplar Fruit fainted. He was sure that he had never taught her this thing. Then, it was obvious who taught her. "Bebe." Bebe said, to make four. Kiki said while recalling. "Yes, to be honest." Poplar Fruit was amused by his daughter's non-standard pronunciation. He corrected her. "4. Kiki said with certainty. "Okay, I won't argue with you." Poplar Fruit smiled, stretched out his right pinky, and hooked it on Kiki's small pinky. "Pinky promise, jump up." Kiki shook her hand, but she couldn't shake her father's big hand. She said, 100 years of happiness. "Pinky promise, hang." Poplar Fruit thought for a while, but still said it like Kiki, jump up, 100 years. After all, the word hang was not suitable for a child to hear. After the pinky promise, Kiki finally smiled with satisfaction. Poplar Fruit smiled, kissed his daughter's face, and said with a smile, "Why, you like it a lot, right?" Kiki twisted her neck to avoid it, and giggled non-stop. Goldie, who was chewing on its own moya bone, raised its head in confusion and looked at the father and daughter, not understanding what was going on. Goldie's moya bone was a high-end product that Poplar Fruit had brought back from abroad. It was made of an unknown gel, colored and odorless plastic. Humans couldn't sense any smell. But as soon as Poplar Fruit took it out, Goldie would immediately rush over like it was possessed, wagging its tail non-stop. Therefore, Poplar Fruit often used this moya bone as a reward to teach Goldie to do things. For example, just now, when Poplar Fruit asked Goldie to get the rag, it went over obediently. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, everyone use your votes to support the poor. Chapter 281. The Land Rover wasn't considered a luxury car in Yangcheng, but it attracted the attention of countless people the moment it set foot in the small county town of his hometown. The huge body, the domineering front of the car, and the roar of the engine was like a tiger in the mountains. It was simply too cool. Back in the countryside, the Land Rover's super-high chassis finally showed its advantage. Some muddy puddles or rocky paths could still be rolled over by the Land Rover. Unlike those muddy cars, they had to be careful and even had to get out of the car to check the road conditions before daring to move. "Third aunt, did you just come back from work?" Poplar Fruit rolled down the window and greeted the village woman. The road in the village was a little narrow. For safety reasons, Poplar Fruit stopped the car and let the people and motorcycles in front pass first. Little Poplar Fruit. When Third Aunt saw that the person driving the car was actually young Guo, she opened her mouth wide in surprise. "You bought this car?" "Haha, yes." Poplar Fruit laughed. Looking at Third Aunt's shocked, worshipful, and fearful eyes, he finally understood why people said, "Riches and honor don't return home, it's like walking in the night." This kind of feeling made it easy for people to get carried away. Little poplar fruit is promising. When poplar fruit was young, third aunt helped take care of poplar fruit. Now, third aunt smiled happily. You bought such a beautiful car, you're promising. You flatter me, third aunt. Oh right, my mom should be home, right? Poplar fruit asked. Yes, I just came out with your family. Third aunt smiled and said, your mom keeps asking you when you're coming home. Hurry up and go home. Okay. Oh right, third aunt, come over for dinner later, okay? I brought back young Cheng sausages and American blueberry jam. Come and try it. Poplar fruit smiled. All right. I won't stand on ceremony with you. Little poplar fruit, you've made a name for yourself. After saying goodbye, third aunt went back happily. When they got home, a naughty child had already run to Poplar Fruit's house to inform young Tai and the others. Brother Guo is back, and he drove a big car. Young Tai and Shu Jinfeng, who was grinning from ear to ear, hurriedly ran to the entrance of the courtyard. They pulled open the 2 large iron gates to welcome their son and granddaughter back. Mom! Dad! Poplar Fruit stuck his head out of the car window and shouted. It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Shu Jinfeng nodded, the smile on her face almost drowning her wrinkles. He drove back to the courtyard, stopped the car, pulled the handbrake, and pulled out the key. Only then did Poplar Fruit jump out of the car. Where's my key? Shu Jinfeng asked anxiously. Don't worry, your granddaughter is in the car. Poplar Fruit smiled. He went around to the front passenger seat, gently unbuckled the seatbelt, and carried the sleeping Kiki out of the car. After driving for more than 6 hours, no matter how much Kiki liked the feeling of driving at lightning speed, she couldn't resist the sleepiness. After handing Kiki over to his mom who was waiting by the side, Poplar Fruit began to move the things out of the car one by one. These 2 boxes are Kiki's things. I'll put them upstairs later. Poplar Fruit smiled. Then he moved several beautifully wrapped boxes out of the car. Gifts. Young Linjie jumped behind Poplar Fruit and clapped his hands excitedly. These aren't yours. Poplar Fruit smiled and reminded him, don't open them, do you hear me? These gifts were all for Kiki. Before Poplar Fruit came back, he mentioned Kiki's birthday to a few good friends. As a result, they hurriedly sent Kiki's gifts over. Yao Dehua, Song Jiwen, Uncle Jin, and so on. Fong Beibei was originally prepared to celebrate Kiki's birthday. She didn't expect Poplar Fruit to bring Kiki back to her hometown. She could only ask Poplar Fruit to go back to school to bring Kiki's gifts back. Of course, these gifts couldn't be opened. They had to wait until Kiki's birthday to let Kiki open them. Fong Beibei had repeatedly reminded her. Poplar Fruit thought of Zhang Yujie again. Although she was far away in Beijing, she didn't forget Kiki's birthday. When Poplar Fruit was in America, he told her about Kiki's birthday plans. So when she parted ways with Poplar Fruit in Beijing, she asked for the address of Poplar Fruit's hometown. She said that there would be a big surprise for Kiki. Poplar Fruit was looking forward to it. Where's Xiao Duan? Why didn't she come back with you? Shu Jinfeng came over and asked. When she mentioned Duan Xueqing, Poplar Fruit had a headache. He stammered, she has something to do, and she can't leave work. Don't lie to me. Shu Jinfeng knew her son well. She saw through him at a glance. Don't tell me you had a fight with Xiao Duan. She's a good girl. Why did you have to make her leave? Poplar Fruit wanted to tell his mother the truth. There was really nothing between them, but he hesitated and said, Mom, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Shu Jinfeng's eyebrows were raised. She almost flipped out at Poplar Fruit. But considering that Kiki was sleeping in her arms, she couldn't do anything. She could only mutter, will you take care of it, or are you lying to me? Forget it, I'll teach you a lesson later. She's such a good girl. Shou Jie, this is your present. Poplar Fruit took out a big box from the car and smiled. Uncle bought it from America. Young Linjie happily took it. When he saw the packaging, he screamed, Transformers. It's the original Optimus Prime. Poplar Fruit added with a smile. Unfortunately, Young Linjie didn't listen at all. He hugged the toy and ran back to his room to play with it. Dad, this is the ginseng that I brought back from America. Poplar Fruit took out 2 beautifully packaged boxes from the car and handed them to young Tai, saying, "It's definitely authentic. It's many times better than what you can buy in the city. You can always cut a few slices at home and use it to make chicken soup. It's good for your heart and blood vessels. Especially you have high blood pressure. Drink this soup often and you'll be fine after a while." When Poplar Fruit was in America, he had asked the doctor there. He knew that it had such effects, so he bought it back. "How much is this?" Young Tai took it and asked, "Why are you spending so much money?" "It's okay." Poplar Fruit smiled, "You know that I've made some money. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to afford this car. I bought things for you and Mom, so you should keep it. Don't be stingy with it. I'll buy more for you in the future." "Oh right." Poplar Fruit suddenly remembered and asked, "Where are my sister and brother-in-law? They didn't come back. Didn't you say that they set up a factory in the village?" Young Tai shook his head and said, "Those two are busy people. They're busier than you. They go out every day and don't come back for a week. In the past, they could still stay at home for a meal. Now, they haven't eaten at home for more than a month. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.